there is a hidden branch of psychology. People call it dark psychology. It is not the part of psychology that heals or comforts or helps us understand one another, but rather the part that can be twisted into tools of control, manipulation, and subtle coercion. It is the shadowed side of the human mind, where natural instincts, emotions, and cognitive patterns are quietly reshaped and used to bend behavior, often without us even realizing it. But let's make one thing clear. The purpose of exploring these techniques is not to apply them against others. It is not to harm, not to dominate, not to deceive. The purpose is to recognize, to become aware, and to protect ourselves from being entangled in invisible webs of influence. Because the truth is, these tactics rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with alarms or warning signs. They hide in everyday conversations, in the tone of a voice, in the silence that stretches too long, in the way a question is framed, or in the way a promise is dangled before us. They work best when unnoticed, and that is what makes them so dangerous. While we are busy thinking, feeling, reacting, or trusting, the ground beneath our choices may already have been shaped by someone else's hand. So let us walk together into this hidden territory. Let us treat it as a map, shining a quiet light onto the darker corridors of human behavior. Not to travel down those corridors ourselves, but to know when we are standing at the edge of one, so that we may pause, stay alert, and hold on to the freedom of our own mind. 1. The Ben Franklin effect. There is a curious phenomenon in human psychology, one that seems at first almost backward. It is known as the Ben Franklin effect. The story goes that Benjamin Franklin, the American statesman and inventor, once had a political rival, someone who disliked him, opposed him, and resisted any form of cooperation. Instead of trying to win him over with kindness or gifts, Franklin did something unexpected. He asked this rival for a favor. It was a simple request. He wanted to borrow a rare book. The rival agreed, perhaps out of courtesy, perhaps out of pride. He lent Franklin the book, and from that moment, the relationship began to change. Why? Because when we help someone, our mind quietly reshapes the story we tell ourselves. We begin to think, if I did a favor for this person, maybe I don't dislike them after all. Maybe I must actually care about them, at least a little. The brain dislikes contradictions. This tension between I don't like this person and I just help them creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. To reduce the dissonance, the mind adjusts its beliefs. The simplest way to resolve the conflict is to rewrite the feeling. I must actually like this person. Otherwise, why would I have helped them? And so, helping someone doesn't just benefit the person who receives the favor. It changes the heart of the person who gave it. This is the secret hidden inside the Ben Franklin effect. It reverses the natural expectation. We assume that if we want someone to like us, we should do things for them, give to them, support them. But here, the opposite takes place. When they help us, when they invest in us, their mind begins to shift in our favor. On the surface, it feels noble. It feels generous. The one doing the favor believes they're acting out of kindness, out of decency. They walk away with a sense of pride, even a sense of wisdom. But underneath, a subtle rewriting has begun. A seed of attachment has been planted, and they may not even notice that their emotions are slowly being rewritten without their consent. And this is where the danger lies. The Ben Franklin effect can be used in ways that are almost invisible. You might think you are building a relationship freely, that your kindness is your own choice. But in truth, your own actions are being turned against you, reinterpreted in your mind until loyalty, warmth, and even affection emerge, whether you wanted them to or not. It is, in essence, the art of turning your generosity into your own chain. You feel noble, but you are being bound. And once we see it, we can never unsee it. The next time someone asks for a small favor, the question echoes in the back of the mind. Do they truly need my help? Or are they quietly binding me to them? 2. Triangulation. In the delicate space between two people, trust and clarity are essential. But sometimes, a third figure is quietly invited into the relationship. Not to help, not to support, but to destabilize. This is the tactic of triangulation. At its core, triangulation is simple. Instead of dealing directly with you, someone introduces another person, another voice, another presence into the dynamic. Suddenly, what should have been a dialogue between two hearts becomes a triangle filled with tension, comparison, and subtle rivalry. It might look harmless at first. A partner might say, "Well, my ex never had a problem with this." A colleague might whisper, "Everyone else on the team thinks you're falling behind." A parent might sigh, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" The message is not spoken directly, yet it's felt deeply. You are no longer just yourself. You are measured against someone else. And in that comparison, you shrink. Triangulation works because it creates a sense of insecurity. It plants doubt. Am I not enough? Do I need to prove myself? Am I being replaced? The very presence of a third party, even if only mentioned, changes the emotional landscape. Instead of standing firmly in your own worth, you begin to compete, to justify, to chase validation that should have been freely given. And here lies the cruelty. The person using triangulation maintains control without ever appearing openly aggressive. They don't need to argue directly. They don't need to shout. They simply plant the image of someone else and then step back, while you, unsettled, begin to fight for their approval. Over time, this erodes confidence. It turns relationships into contests. It transforms love into a competition for affection, work into a race for recognition, and family bonds into a silent struggle for worth. Triangulation is not about truth. It is about leverage. The third person may not even know they're being used. There might be a shadow, a name, or even an imaginary everyone summoned to make you doubt yourself. And the result is always the same. You feel displaced. You feel uncertain. You feel small. But once we recognize the tactic, the spell begins to break. When a comparison is drawn, when a third figure is used to unsettle us, we can pause and remember, I am not defined by someone else's shadow. I do not need to compete for worth that I already carry within me. The triangle collapses the moment we refuse to step into it. 3. Gaslighting by omission. Sometimes deception doesn't come from the lies that are spoken, but from the truths that are withheld. This is the essence of gaslighting by omission. Unlike direct lies, this form of manipulation works in silence, in the quiet gaps between what is said and what is left unsaid. Imagine a partner who forgets to tell you about an important meeting, a colleague who omits a crucial detail from a report, a friend who forgets to mention that others were invited to an event you were left out of. No words are spoken against you. No open conflict is visible. but the missing pieces distort reality all the same. It is not about what you are told. It is about what you are never allowed to know. And over time, the effect is corrosive. You begin to question your own memory. Did they say that, and I just forgot? You begin to doubt your instincts. Maybe I am overreacting. You begin to wonder if you are losing your grip on what is real. This is the power of omission. It creates confusion without confrontation. The manipulator maintains the image of honesty. After all, they never lied, did they? But beneath that thin veil, reality is carefully edited, reshaped into a version that serves their control. The danger lies in the subtlety. Unlike loud accusations or obvious falsehoods, omission feels invisible. It slides under the radar. You cannot point to the exact moment when it happened because the very tactic is built on absence, on what was never given to you. And the more it happens, the more fragile you become. Your trust in your own memory begins to erode. Your confidence in your own perception weakens, until one day you find yourself leaning entirely on their version of events because your own feels unreliable. Gaslighting by omission is not about words. It is about silence sharpened into a blade. It does not shout, but it cuts. And the wound it leaves is the slow unraveling of certainty itself. To recognize it is to reclaim clarity, to pause and remind yourself, if I feel that something is missing, perhaps it is because it truly is. My instincts are not my enemy, they are my guide. And with that awareness, the silence begins to lose its grip. 4. Semantic infiltration. Words are not just sounds, they are carriers of meaning, of memory, of emotion. And sometimes they become tools of manipulation. This is the tactic of semantic infiltration, the subtle weaving of emotionally charged or ideologically loaded language into everyday conversation until the words themselves reshape the way we think. It happens quietly. A policy of surveillance is called public safety. A restriction is called protection. Aggression is framed as strength. Control is renamed care. The words slip into our minds like seeds, and once planted, they begin to grow, not as neutral labels, but as lenses that color the way we perceive reality. The brilliance and the danger of this tactic is that it bypasses argument altogether. No one has to convince you with evidence or reasoning. Instead, the words themselves do the convincing. If you hear the same phrase enough times, your brain begins to accept its framing as natural, even obvious. And soon, questioning it feels strange. After all, who would be against safety? Who would resist protection? Who would dare challenge care? But beneath the softness of those words may lie something far harsher. Language becomes a mask. The very words that should illuminate truth are turned into a fog, blurring your vision, softening your resistance. Semantic infiltration works because the human mind does not only process information, it feels words. When a word carries warmth or threat, inclusion or exclusion, it bypasses logic and strikes at the heart. And once the emotional reaction is triggered, the battle of persuasion is already half won. This is why those who seek control choose their vocabulary with such precision. They do not argue for their reality. They rename reality until you find yourself living inside the dictionary. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: when language changes, thought changes. If you cannot name oppression, how can you resist it? If surveillance is only ever called safety, how can you even imagine freedom? The mind is not conquered in one blow. It is reshaped word by word. And the tool is not always argument or debate, but the quiet drip of words repeated until they become truth. To resist semantic infiltration, we must listen not only to what is being said, but to how it is said. We must ask, whose definition am I accepting? Whose story am I repeating every time I use this word? For the battlefield of thought often begins with the smallest of things, the language on our lips. 5. Reverse psychology. There is a stubborn spark inside every human being, a need to protect our freedom, to prove that our choices are our own. And it is this very spark that reverse psychology exploits. On the surface, it looks almost playful. A parent tells a child, "You probably won't like this vegetable." And suddenly, the child feels compelled to try it just to prove the parent wrong. A teacher says, "I doubt you'll be able to solve this problem." And the student leans in with determination, eager to show that they can. A partner sighs, "I don't expect you to change." And immediately, the other feels the pull to prove that they can, in fact, do better. Reverse psychology works because it aligns with one of the deepest human instincts, the need for autonomy. We resist being controlled. We resist being told what to do. And when someone suggests that we cannot or should not, something inside us rises up in defiance. It feels like freedom. It feels like choice. But in reality, the path of our reaction has already been laid out for us. The trick is simple yet devastating. By presenting the opposite of what they truly desire, the manipulator awakens our natural urge to resist. And in resisting, we walk straight into the outcome they intended all along. What makes this tactic so dangerous is its deniability. If confronted, the manipulator can always shrug. "I didn't tell you to do it. In fact, I told you the opposite." And in a sense, that is true. They never pushed us directly. They simply leaned against the door of our pride, knowing it would swing open. Over time, this can erode trust, not only in them, but in ourselves. We begin to wonder, am I truly choosing freely? Or am I just reacting to reversed signals placed in my path? The freedom we thought we were defending becomes an illusion, a carefully baited trap. And yet, awareness is the key. The moment we pause, the moment we ask ourselves, why do I feel the need to prove them wrong? Who benefits from my reaction? The spell begins to break. True freedom is not always doing the opposite of what is suggested. True freedom is the quiet power of choosing, not out of defiance, not out of pride, but out of clarity. 6. Covert contracts. On the surface, kindness looks pure. A favor given freely, a gesture of care, a gift of time or attention. But sometimes, hidden beneath that kindness, there is a contract. A contract you never agreed to sign. This is the essence of covert contracts. A covert contract begins when someone does something for you, something thoughtful, something generous. They may cook you dinner, help you with a project, listen to your troubles, or offer their support. And you accept, believing it to be genuine, believing it to be given without strings. But underneath, unspoken, there is an expectation, a hidden if-then clause. If I do this for you, then you will do what I want. If I give you kindness, then you will give me love. If I help you, then you will owe me loyalty. The danger is not in the action itself. It is in the silence that surrounds it. The terms are never spoken, never agreed upon. You are unaware that an invisible contract has been drafted in your name. And when the hidden expectation is not met, the mask slips. The warmth turns cold. The kindness curdles into resentment. Suddenly, you are met with anger, with blame, with withdrawal. You stand there confused, asking, "What did I do wrong?" But in truth, you broke an agreement you never even knew existed. Covert contracts manipulate not through direct demand, but through guilt. They trap you in a cycle where generosity is no longer a gift, but a debt. And the more you try to repay, the more the terms expand, always unspoken, always shifting. What makes this tactic so insidious is that it can feel noble on the surface. The one offering kindness may see themselves as selfless, as loving, as supportive. And yet, the unspoken ledger they keep tells another story, one of control, of silent bargaining, of turning affection into obligation. The antidote lies in awareness. True kindness is free. It expects nothing in return. When generosity comes with invisible strings, it is not love, it is leverage. To recognize covert contracts is to reclaim clarity. It is to remind ourselves, I am not bound by agreements I never made. I am free to receive without being trapped, and I am free to give without keeping score. And in that freedom, the hidden contracts lose their hold. 7. Deliberate misinterpretation. Communication is delicate. We speak with the hope of being understood, of having our thoughts and intentions received as they truly are. But sometimes, our words are not just heard, they are twisted. This is the tactic of deliberate misinterpretation. Here, the manipulator does not argue with what you actually said. Instead, they bend your words, reshape your meaning, and throw it back at you in a distorted form. You might say something gentle like, "I wish we could spend more time together," and they respond, "So now you're saying I'm a terrible partner." You might express a boundary, "I don't feel comfortable with that," and they twist it into, "Oh, so you think I'm dangerous?" With every distortion, the goal is the same, to push you into a defensive position. Instead of standing by your original thought, you find yourself scrambling to correct the record. "That's not what I meant. You're misunderstanding me. Let me explain again." But this is not misunderstanding. It is strategy. They are not mishearing by accident. They are misrepresenting by design. The effect is subtle but powerful. It shifts the balance of the conversation. Suddenly, you are no longer speaking your truth. You are busy untangling the knots they tied in your words. And while you are on the defensive, they hold the upper hand. Over time, this tactic can wear you down. You begin to hesitate before speaking, wondering how your words will be twisted. You may even start censoring yourself, silencing your voice to avoid the battle altogether. And in that silence, they win. For what they sought was not clarity, but control. The tragedy of deliberate misinterpretation is that it corrodes trust. It poisons dialogue. It makes even the simplest communication feel like walking through a minefield, never knowing which step will explode beneath you. But awareness changes everything. When you recognize the tactic, you no longer feel the need to chase every distortion. Instead, you can stand firm and say, "That is not what I said. That is not what I meant. And I will not argue against words you put in my mouth." Clarity is power, and refusing to wrestle with their distortions is how you reclaim it. 8. Controlled confusion. The human mind craves order. We long for clarity, for patterns, for meaning we can hold on to. But when the ground beneath us becomes unstable, when messages clash, when truths contradict, we lose our footing. And in that moment of imbalance, we become vulnerable. This is the strategy of controlled confusion. It begins when someone deliberately surrounds you with contradictions. They say one thing today and the opposite tomorrow. They promise security, then withdraw it. They praise you in one breath and belittle you in the next. Each mixed signal leaves you grasping for stability, trying to piece together a coherent story. Did I misunderstand? Was I wrong? Which version is real? And while you are busy trying to solve the puzzle, the manipulator quietly tightens their grip. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its chaos, because when nothing feels solid, you stop trusting your own perception. You start leaning on theirs. They become the only apparent anchor in a storm they themselves created. Think of it like a magician's trick. While your eyes chase the confusion of one hand, the other hand makes the real move. Your attention is occupied, your logic scrambled, your energy drained. And in that state of disorientation, control is quietly established. The danger of controlled confusion is not just the frustration it causes. It is the erosion of self-trust. You begin to feel small, incapable, dependent. Instead of standing firm in your own understanding, you surrender to theirs just to escape the exhaustion of constant contradiction. But here is the truth. Confusion itself is a signal. When the words and actions of someone consistently tangle you in knots, it is rarely by accident. Clarity does not require endless riddles. Love doesn't demand contradictions. Trust doesn't thrive in doublespeak. To recognize controlled confusion is to step outside the maze. It is to pause and say, "This chaos is not mine. I will not chase it. I will hold on to my own sense of clarity." And in that refusal, the fog begins to lift and the strings of control begin to break. 9. The false consensus trick. Human beings are not meant to live alone. From the earliest days of humanity, survival depended on the tribe. To be surrounded by others meant safety, shared food, shared fire, shared protection. To be isolated was to face danger, hunger, and predators alone. And even though the world has changed, this instinct has not disappeared. Deep within us still lies a powerful truth. We long to belong. We fear exclusion. We dread being the lone voice, the outsider, the one who doesn't fit in. It is this ancient need that the false consensus trick manipulates. The tactic is simple but effective. Someone convinces you that everyone else already agrees with them and that you, standing alone, are the only one resisting. You might hear words like, "Nobody else thinks this is a problem, only you. All the others understand me. It's just you making a fuss. Everybody agrees with me." Don't isolate yourself by being the difficult one. Notice how the trick bypasses logic. It doesn't matter whether the claim is true. It doesn't matter whether evidence exists. The moment you believe you are the only one standing apart, fear begins to creep in. Because to the human mind, being the only one can feel dangerous. It whispers, "What if I'm wrong? What if I'm overreacting? Maybe it's safer to go along, to blend in, to agree." The manipulator knows this. They know that the pressure of the crowd, even an imaginary one, is often more powerful than reason itself. But here's the secret. In many cases, the consensus does not exist at all. It is fabricated, exaggerated, or distorted. The supposed everyone might be one or two carefully chosen examples, or sometimes no one at all. It is a phantom chorus, summoned only to silence you. And while you wrestle with self-doubt, while you bend yourself to match the shape of the imaginary majority, the manipulator gains control. You trade away your certainty in exchange for acceptance. You shrink your truth so that you do not stand out. But the cost of this bargain is steep. Each time you silence your inner voice for the comfort of belonging, you weaken the bond with yourself. And over time, you may find that you no longer know what you believe, only what you are told everyone else believes. To resist the false consensus, trick requires courage. It requires remembering that standing alone does not mean being wrong. Truth has never depended on numbers. History is filled with moments where a single dissenting voice, ridiculed at first, became the spark of real change. So when you hear everyone agrees, only you don't, pause, breathe, and remind yourself consensus can be fabricated. My perception is still valid. I do not need the comfort of the crowd to trust my own clarity. True, belonging doesn't demand silence. True connection does not require erasing yourself. And sometimes the loneliest voice in the room is also the truest one. 10. Plausible deniability framing. Some words are sharp, direct, impossible to mistake, but others are slippery. They carry just enough meaning to wound, yet enough ambiguity to be denied. This is the art of plausible deniability framing. It begins with a phrase that unsettles you, a remark that stings, a statement that feels dismissive or cruel. You question it, you push back, and instantly the retreat begins. Oh, you're overthinking. You're too sensitive. I was just joking. The words are carefully chosen so that they hover in a gray zone, not clear enough to be pinned down, not sharp enough to be openly condemned. If you call them out, the blame shifts back to you. Suddenly, you are not the one being wronged. You are the one who can't take a joke, the one who reads too much into things. And that is the brilliance and the cruelty of this tactic. It allows the manipulator to attack without ever appearing to attack, to hurt without ever admitting harm, to keep you doubting yourself, unsure whether you are reacting to reality or to shadows of your own imagination. Over time, plausible deniability creates a constant unease. You begin to second-guess your feelings. Did they really mean that? Or am I exaggerating? You hesitate to speak up because you know the response will always be the same. A shrug, a smirk, a deflection. The more you question them, the more you appear unreasonable. And slowly, the balance of power shifts. They are free to say whatever they wish, shielded by ambiguity, while you become trapped in a cycle of doubt and silence. But here's the truth. Words are not only what is said, they are also what is felt. If your heart tightens, if your spirit recoils, if your intuition whispers that something is wrong, that matters. It is not paranoia to trust your own reaction. It is not weakness to name the wound, even when the blade is hidden. The strength of plausible deniability lies in convincing you to mistrust yourself. The way out lies in reclaiming that trust by saying, "No, I know what I heard. I know what I felt. I do not need their permission to honor my own experience. Ambiguity is their shield. Clarity is yours." 11. The truth sandwich technique. Lies, when spoken plainly, are fragile. They stand exposed, vulnerable to scrutiny, easy to question. But when dressed in the clothing of truth, they become far harder to detect. This is the essence of the truth sandwich technique. A manipulation so simple, yet so disarming, that it often passes unnoticed. The tactic works like this. A lie is placed carefully between two truths. The first truth earns your trust. The second reinforces it. And in the middle, slipped quietly, almost invisibly, rests the deception. Imagine someone saying, "You know, I've always supported you. That's why I told everyone that you've been struggling at work. But you don't have to worry. I'll always be on your side." Two truths, their support in the past, their promise for the future, frame the lie in the middle, the betrayal of your confidence. And because the outer layers ring true, the deception is easier to swallow. This technique is dangerous, not only because it hides lies, but because it reshapes trust itself. When truth and falsehood are woven together, your mind has to work harder to separate them. And the human brain, eager for coherence, often chooses the path of least resistance. It accepts the whole sandwich. The manipulator knows this. They know that our defenses drop when we hear something familiar, something real. The first truth softens us. The second seals the frame. And by then, the lie has already entered, unnoticed. Over time, repeated truth sandwiches erode our ability to discern. We begin to doubt less, question less. We assume that because most of what they say feels true, all of it must be true. And that is when we are most vulnerable, when we can no longer tell the difference between sincerity and deceit. But awareness breaks the spell. When we encounter a mix of truth and falsehood, we can pause and examine which part of this is verifiable, which part rests only on their word, and why was this claim cushioned between things I already believe? Truth does not need camouflage, only lies do. And the moment we see the structure, the bread of truth holding the filling of falsehood, we can take it apart, discard the lie, and keep what is real. Because clarity is not about swallowing everything whole. It is about tasting carefully, questioning each flavor, and refusing to consume what poisons the mind. 12. Gaslight by proxy. Gaslighting alone is powerful enough, twisting your perception of reality, making you question your memory, your instincts, even your sanity. But when gaslighting is reinforced by others, its power multiplies. This is the tactic of gaslight by proxy. At its core, it works like this. The manipulator recruits another person, or sometimes an entire group, to echo their distorted version of events. What once was only one voice against yours suddenly becomes a chorus. Imagine this. You confront someone for saying something hurtful. They deny it outright. And then, as if on cue, a mutual friend chimes in, "Yeah, I was there too." I don't remember them saying that either. Or picture a workplace conflict. You raise a concern about a colleague's behavior. They dismiss it. And then you find that others, who were told their side of the story first, have already aligned with them, shaking their heads, looking at you as if you're the one imagining things. The power of this tactic lies in isolation. When your reality is denied, not just by one person, but by several, the pressure becomes overwhelming. You begin to wonder, if everyone else sees it differently, maybe I really am wrong. Maybe it is me. Gaslight by proxy strikes at one of the deepest fears we carry. The fear of standing alone against the group. It exploits the human tendency to trust collective memory over individual experience. And when that collective has been carefully influenced by the manipulator, you find yourself outnumbered in a game you never even knew was being played. The cruelty of this method is that the recruited proxies may not even realize they are being used. They might be convinced by half-truths, subtle framing, or carefully chosen omissions. To them, they are simply siding with what they believe to be true. But in reality, they have become unwitting instruments in the erosion of your confidence. The result is a profound loneliness. You feel unseen, unheard, unsupported. Your own memories feel shaky, your emotions invalid, your perception unreliable. And in that void of self-trust, the manipulator's control grows stronger. But here lies the key. When many voices deny your truth, it does not automatically make them right. A chorus of echoes is still just one message repeated. And even if you stand alone, your perception remains valid. Gaslight by proxy can only succeed if you surrender your trust in yourself. The antidote is to anchor inward, to hold firmly to the quiet knowledge. I was there. I experienced this. My truth does not vanish just because others have been convinced otherwise. When you reclaim that anchor, the borrowed voices lose their weight and the spell of proxy gaslighting begins to break. 13. False equivalence framing. Not all comparisons are fair, yet when two things are placed side by side, spoken in the same breath, our minds naturally begin to treat them as related, as though they are somehow equal. This is the hidden danger of false equivalence framing. The tactic is simple. Take two events, two actions, or two choices that are fundamentally different and present them as if they belong in the same category. By doing so, the manipulator blurs the line between right and wrong, truth and falsehood, justice and injustice. Imagine this. You confront someone for lying. They respond, "Well, you kept something from me once too." The situations may be entirely different. Your omission might have been minor. There's a deliberate betrayal. But the comparison draws them together as if the weight were the same. Or consider this. A person is caught manipulating finances. Instead of addressing the act, they say, "Everyone bends the rules sometimes." Don't you ever take office supplies home from work? The scale and the intent are worlds apart, yet the framing makes them appear side by side, as if both were equally questionable. This is how false equivalence works. It doesn't erase the truth directly, it dilutes it. It muddies the waters until clarity feels impossible. And when clarity fades, accountability slips away. The psychological impact is powerful. When you are faced with a false equivalence, you may feel cornered, forced to defend yourself for something minor instead of holding the other person accountable for something major. The focus shifts away from their wrongdoing and onto your supposed equal fault. Over time, this framing corrodes moral boundaries. It whispers, "Everyone is guilty. Everyone is the same. And if everyone is equally flawed, then who has the right to call out wrongdoing at all?" But here is the truth. Not all actions carry the same weight. Not all mistakes are equal. Not every wrong deserves to be placed on the same scale. To recognize false equivalence is to reclaim clarity. It is to say, no, these are not the same. The scale, the intent, the consequences, none of it matches. I will not let this comparison blur the truth, because justice requires discernment, and discernment begins with refusing to let false comparisons erase the difference between a shadow and a storm. 14. Tactical ignorance. Ignorance at times can be genuine, born from not knowing, from inexperience, from a lack of information. But there is another kind of ignorance, one that is crafted, sharpened, and used as a tool. This is tactical ignorance. At its surface, it looks harmless. A shrug of the shoulders, a puzzled look, a quiet, "I don't know how to do that." But beneath that mask lies intention. The ignorance is not real. It is performed. The manipulator pretends not to understand, not to remember, not to know what you're talking about. And in doing so, they escape responsibility. A partner may feign confusion about housework, sighing, "I just can't figure out how the washing machine works." And so you do it for them. A colleague may claim, "I didn't realize that deadline applied to me." And so the burden shifts to you. A friend might insist, "I had no idea that hurt you," even though the same wound has been discussed before. And so you forgive them again. Each time the ignorance is tactical. It forces you to fill in the gaps, to carry the weight, to clean up the mess. And while you're working harder, explaining more, overcompensating for their supposed confusion, they remain free of effort, free of fault. The genius of this tactic is its deniability. How can you argue with someone who insists they simply didn't know? It sounds innocent. It sounds unintentional. And yet, the pattern reveals the truth. Ignorance repeated is rarely ignorance at all. The cost of tactical ignorance is subtle but heavy. It drains your energy. It erodes fairness. It trains you to lower your expectations until you expect nothing at all. And once expectations are gone, accountability disappears with them. But recognition restores power. The moment you notice the pattern, the repeated forgetfulness, the selective confusion, you can see it for what it is. Not an accident, but a strategy. And from there, you can choose differently. You can refuse to carry what is not yours. You can hold the line and say, "Not knowing does not excuse responsibility." If you want the role, you carry the weight that comes with it. Ignorance may be played as innocence, but in truth, it is often just another mask of control. 15. Minimization. There are wounds that cannot be seen. Wounds of the heart, of memory, of dignity. And when we bring these wounds into the light, we hope they will be acknowledged, honored, perhaps even healed. But sometimes, instead of compassion, we are met with dismissal. This is the tactic of minimization. It works by shrinking your experience, by taking something meaningful to you, whether it is pain, joy, or fear, and reducing it to something small, something insignificant. You might say, "That really hurt me." And they respond, "Come on, it wasn't that bad." You might confess, "I'm struggling, this feels overwhelming." And they shrug, "You're overreacting. Other people have it worse." You might share a moment of excitement, a personal victory, and they deflate it with, "It's not such a big deal. Anyone could have done that." Each time, the message is the same. What you feel doesn't matter. And slowly, that message seeps in. You begin to second-guess your emotions. Maybe I am exaggerating. Maybe I am weak for feeling this way. The sharpness of your feelings dulls, not because they were untrue, but because someone convinced you they were unworthy of attention. The cruelty of minimization is that it does not erase the pain. It erases your right to feel it. It teaches you that your emotions are excessive, your experiences trivial, your truth disposable. And so, instead of reaching outward for connection, you retreat inward, silenced not by force, but by doubt. Why does this tactic work? Because humans naturally seek validation. We look to others to help confirm that what we feel is real. When that confirmation is denied, We may abandon our own certainty in favor of theirs. But here is the truth. No one else has the authority to measure the weight of your experience. What felt heavy to you was heavy. What cut deep in your heart was deep. What brought you joy was worth celebrating. To recognize minimization is to reclaim the value of your emotions. It is to say, my feelings do not need permission. They are valid simply because they are mine. And in honoring your own truth, you protect yourself from the slow erosion of worth that minimization seeks to impose. 16. Selective memory manipulation. Memory is not perfect. It fades, it blurs, it reshapes itself over time. And because of this fragility, memory can be one of the easiest tools to exploit. This is the heart of selective memory manipulation, the tactic of remembering only what benefits the manipulator, while conveniently forgetting the rest. Imagine a promise made. They swear they will help you, support you, stand by you. But when the moment arrives, their memory falters. I never said that. Or think of a fight. They recall every sharp word you spoke, quoting them with precision, but forget the insults they hurled, the wounds they inflicted. In another moment, they might highlight the one time you failed them, holding it like a stone of proof, while conveniently erasing the countless times you showed up, sacrificed, and gave your best. The pattern is clear. Memory is edited, not by accident, but by design. They hold on to fragments that serve their control while discarding the rest as if it never happened. The effect on you is exhausting. You find yourself constantly defending, constantly trying to prove reality. You replay conversations. You search for evidence. You question your own recollection. And while you are busy scrambling to prove your memory, they stand calmly behind theirs, wielding selective recall as a weapon. Over time, this can erode not just trust in them, but trust in yourself. You start to wonder, am I remembering wrong? Am I losing my grip? Maybe they're right after all. And in that doubt, the manipulator wins, because the more you rely on their version of events, the easier it becomes for them to shape the story. The cruelty of this tactic is that it masquerades as something natural. After all, who doesn't forget details now and then? But the key difference is consistency. They never forget what benefits them. Their memory lapses only when accountability is near. To resist selective memory manipulation, we must anchor ourselves, keep records, write things down, trust the sharp edges of your own recollection, and most of all, remind yourself, my experience is valid. My memory is not worthless just because it is inconvenient to someone else. For memory may be imperfect, yes, but it is still yours. And when someone seeks to rewrite it for their gain, holding fast to your truth becomes an act of quiet defiance. 17. Ambiguity Control. The human heart longs for clarity. We crave certainty in relationships, in commitments, in the words we hear from others. It is this certainty that allows us to feel safe, to plan, to trust. But when clarity is withheld, when everything remains hazy, undefined, uncertain, we find ourselves trapped in a restless search for answers. This is the essence of ambiguity control. The manipulator uses vagueness as a weapon. They keep their promises unclear, their commitments undefined, their words open to multiple interpretations. They give you just enough to hope, but never enough to stand secure. Let's see where this goes. Maybe one day, but not right now. Don't overthink it. We're fine. Each phrase offers a hint of connection, but no solid ground. And so, you begin to fill in the gaps yourself, waiting, hoping, interpreting, endlessly trying to decode what they really mean. The trap is this: the more uncertain you feel, the harder you work to gain certainty. You reach out more often, you seek reassurance, you adjust your behavior, all in the hope of finally securing clarity. But the manipulator never gives it. The ambiguity remains, and your dependence deepens. This tactic thrives because of how the human mind reacts to uncertainty. When left in limbo, our brains crave resolution. We will spend energy, time, even dignity chasing after answers that remain just out of reach. And the manipulator knows this, knows that by keeping the door half open, they can keep you standing outside, waiting. Over time, ambiguity control wears down your confidence. You begin to doubt your worth. If they don't commit, maybe I'm not enough. You start questioning yourself more than you question them. And the longer you stay in the fog, the harder it becomes to imagine stepping into the light. But here is the truth. Clarity is not too much to ask. Certainty is not a weakness. It is the foundation of real connection. When someone refuses to give it, when they deliberately keep you guessing, it is not because you are unworthy of clarity. It is because they gain power from your confusion. The antidote is courage, the courage to step away from endless ambiguity and to claim your right to certainty, to say, if you cannot speak clearly, if you cannot stand firmly, then I will not live in your shadows. But true trust does not hide in vagueness. True love does not thrive in half answers, and freedom begins the moment you refuse to mistake uncertainty for intimacy. 18. Negative reinforcement. Loop. At the core of every human relationship lies a simple truth. We move toward what feels safe, and we move away from what feels painful. But what happens when safety and pain are carefully controlled by someone else, used not as natural consequences, but as levers to guide your behavior? This is the essence of the negative reinforcement loop. The pattern is deceptively simple. Whenever you resist, whenever you push back, you are met with discomfort, cold silence, sharp words, withdrawal of affection, or even punishment. But the moment you comply, the discomfort vanishes. Defiance equals pain. Submission equals relief. Over time, your nervous system begins to learn the lesson, even if your conscious mind resists it. Your body associates opposition with anxiety, tension, unease. And compliance, whether or not you agree, brings a sudden calm. It feels like peace. But it is not peace. It is programming. This loop rewires your emotional responses. It teaches you that the only way to feel safe, to feel accepted, is to obey. And once the pattern is ingrained, you may find yourself complying automatically without even questioning why. The cruelty of this tactic lies in its invisibility. From the outside, nothing seems extreme. There may be no shouting, no violence, no overt abuse. Just a subtle but consistent cycle. Discomfort when you resist, comfort when you yield. It is the same principle used in animal training. A dog learns that pulling on the leash brings a sharp tug, while walking calmly brings release. The dog does not stop pulling because it understands. It stops because its nervous system has been conditioned. And so it is with people. The manipulator does not persuade you. They do not argue with reason or appeal to truth. They simply shape your feelings until your body itself equates obedience with safety. The danger is profound. For once obedience feels safe, rebellion feels unbearable. You no longer ask, "Do I want this?" but instead, "How can I avoid the discomfort?" Your freedom becomes narrower with each cycle until compliance is no longer a choice. It is a reflex, but awareness breaks the loop. The moment you notice the pattern, pain when you resist, relief when you comply, you can begin to separate feeling from truth. Relief is not always safety. Comfort is not always love. And when you see the loop for what it is, a cage built from emotion, you can choose to step outside of it. You can remind yourself, my peace cannot depend on obedience. My safety cannot be purchased with silence, for true connection does not punish resistance, and true love does not train you to obey. 19. Intermittent reinforcement. Human beings thrive on patterns. When rewards are consistent, we know what to expect. When love is steady, we feel safe. When boundaries are clear, we can grow within them. But what happens when rewards, affection, or approval are given not steadily, not predictably, but at random? When kindness appears one moment and vanishes the next? When warmth comes and goes with no explanation? This is the strategy of intermittent reinforcement. At first, it may feel thrilling. The highs are dazzling, the sudden flood of affection, the unexpected praise, the rare gesture of love. But just as quickly, it disappears. Coldness replaces warmth. Criticism replaces encouragement. Indifference replaces connection. And you are left wondering, what did I do wrong? How can I get back to that moment of love again? This unpredictability is what makes the tactic so powerful. It mirrors the same psychological mechanism that drives gambling addiction. When a gambler pulls the lever of a slot machine, most attempts bring nothing. But once in a while, there is a jackpot. And that occasional win is enough to keep them hooked, pulling the lever again and again. So too with intermittent reinforcement in relationships. The rare moments of kindness become jackpots in your emotional world. Even if pain dominates most of the time, the memory of those brief highs keeps you waiting, hoping, craving. And slowly you become addicted, not to the person, not even to the love itself, but to the cycle of hope and reward. You begin to tolerate the lows, convincing yourself they are temporary. You hold on to the memory of the highs, believing they will return if only you try harder, give more, endure longer. The manipulator does not need to be consistent, only inconsistent enough to keep you guessing. They know that uncertainty keeps you tethered, that unpredictability makes you chase. Because when love feels scarce, you cling to every drop. The danger here is subtle but devastating. Your self-worth becomes tied not to who you are, but to their unpredictable approval. Your joy becomes dependent not on life itself, but on their shifting moods. And your freedom dissolves into a cycle of waiting, hoping, and yearning. But clarity begins the moment you recognize the pattern. Love is not meant to feel like gambling. Affection is not meant to arrive like a jackpot. Connection is not meant to be rationed out like scraps of luck. True love is steady. True respect is consistent. And once you see that inconsistency is not passion but control, you can step away from the game and reclaim the stability you deserve. 20. Love bombing. Love, in its truest form, grows slowly. It builds through patience, through trust, through the steady weaving of two lives together. But sometimes, love does not arrive gently. It arrives like a storm. This is the tactic of love bombing. It begins with intensity. From the very first meeting, you are showered with compliments, flooded with affection, overwhelmed with grand gestures. The messages come quickly. You're the most amazing person I've ever met. The gifts are generous, sometimes extravagant. The attention feels constant, unrelenting, almost intoxicating. And in those moments, you feel extraordinary, special, chosen. It is as if someone has finally seen you fully and they cannot get enough. But beneath the surface, this excess has a purpose. It is not affection, it is acceleration. The manipulator uses overwhelming love to bypass the natural pace of trust. What should take months, earning closeness, proving loyalty, building safety, seems to happen in days, even hours. And because the brain responds powerfully to such intensity, you begin to attach quickly. You feel flattered, swept up, almost addicted to the rush of attention. You tell yourself, this must be destiny. This must be real love. But love bombing is not about love. It is about control. The manipulator is not giving freely. They are investing. Each compliment, each gesture, each flood of affection is designed to create dependency, so that when the intensity eventually fades, and it always does, you will chase it, long for it, do whatever it takes to bring it back. And here lies the danger. The love bomber never intended to sustain the intensity. Once you are hooked, once you are dependent, the warmth begins to cool. The grand gestures stop. The affection is rationed, and you are left wondering, what happened? What did I do wrong? How can I bring back the love they once gave so freely? But the truth is that love was never free. It was bait. It was a mask worn long enough to draw you in before the cycle of control began. Love bombing feels like passion, but it is manipulation. It feels like destiny, but it is strategy. It feels like the greatest gift, but it is a carefully crafted trap. Real love does not need to overwhelm to prove itself. Real connection does not demand dependency. It nurtures freedom. And once you learn to see love bombing for what it is, you can step back from the storm and wait for the steady light of love that is true. 21. Guilt tripping. There are few forces more powerful than the human conscience. We want to be kind, to be generous, to be seen as good in the eyes of others. But what happens when that very goodness is turned into a chain? This is the tactic of guilt tripping. It begins when you try to draw a boundary. You say no, softly, gently, respectfully. You choose to protect your time, your energy, your well-being. But instead of acceptance, you are met with a look of disappointment, a sigh, a cutting phrase. I thought you cared about me. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? I guess I just can't count on you. Suddenly, your boundary doesn't feel like strength. It feels like cruelty. Your refusal, no matter how valid, is twisted into selfishness. And now, instead of standing firm, you feel an ache of guilt rising in your chest. This is how guilt tripping works. It transforms love into obligation, kindness into debt. It punishes you not with anger, but with disappointment, not with violence, but with shame. And because shame is such a heavy burden, most of us would rather yield than carry it. We give in, not because we changed our mind, but because we cannot bear the thought of being the selfish one. Over time, guilt tripping reshapes your behavior. You learn to say yes even when you want to say no. You learn to put others first, even when it drains you. You learn to sacrifice yourself, not out of love, but out of fear of disappointing them. The cruelty is that the manipulator may even appear righteous. They present themselves as the wronged party, the one who simply expected better from you. And so, You are left carrying both the guilt and the blame, while they quietly get what they wanted all along. But here is the truth. Love is not a debt to be repaid. Kindness is not a weapon to be used against you. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the truest form of respect for both yourself and the other person. To break free from guilt tripping is to reclaim your right to say no without shame. It is to remember that generosity loses its meaning when it is forced. And that true connection does not demand your submission. It welcomes your freedom, because love, in its purest form, never needs to guilt you into staying. 22nd, disqualification, push-pull. Human beings find comfort in stability. When affection is steady, we feel safe. When warmth is consistent, we relax. When love flows evenly, trust takes root. But when affection becomes unpredictable, warm in one moment, cold in the next, we are pulled into a storm. This is the tactic of push-pull manipulation. It begins with closeness. They draw you in with tenderness, attention, and intimacy. You feel seen, valued, cherished. But just as quickly, the warmth is withdrawn. They grow distant, cold, dismissive. You are left in confusion, wondering what changed, what you did wrong. Then, without warning, the warmth returns. A soft word, a sudden gesture, a flash of intimacy that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. And your heart leaps, relieved, believing the coldness is finally over. But it never truly ends. The cycle repeats: affection, withdrawal, affection again. Each swing pulls you deeper into the pattern until your emotions are no longer your own. The cruelty of push-pull lies in the insecurity it creates. You never know where you stand, so you begin to chase certainty. You find yourself working harder for their attention, desperate for the return of warmth. You overlook the cold moments, clinging instead to the rare flashes of affection, convincing yourself they reveal the real person beneath. But here is the trap. The instability itself is the tactic. By alternating closeness and distance, they create dependency. You become addicted to the cycle, forever reaching, forever hoping, forever waiting for the next moment of a connection. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, but lived from the inside, it feels like emotional whiplash. And the more unstable the pattern, the more you cling to the hope that the warmth will return and stay this time. The danger is that over time, you begin to mistake chaos for passion. The highs feel so intense, the relief so profound, that you start to believe the love is deep, even though it is only unstable. But real intimacy does not need to play hide and seek. Real connection does not thrive on uncertainty. Love that is true does not pull you close only to push you away. To recognize the push-pull cycle is to step outside of it. It is to say, I will not chase the crumbs of affection. I deserve warmth that stays, not warmth that vanishes. For love is not a storm of mixed signals. It is the steady light that does not flicker. 23. Micro-invalidation. Not all dismissals are loud. Some arrive quietly, disguised as casual remarks, small corrections, or phrases so common they almost sound harmless. But over time, these small dismissals carry a heavy weight. This is the tactic of micro-invalidation. It often begins with a single sentence. You don't know what tired is. Other people have it much worse. That's nothing. You should hear what I went through. Each phrase seems minor on its own. One might even brush it off thinking, they didn't mean harm. Maybe I am overreacting, but this is exactly how the tactic works. by eroding your experience in increments until you begin to doubt its value altogether. Micro-invalidation does not shout. It does not accuse. Instead, it quietly suggests that your feelings, your struggles, or your achievements are less real, less important, less worthy of acknowledgement. And because the dismissals are so subtle, they are difficult to challenge. If you object, you risk sounding defensive. If you stay silent, the erosion continues. And little by little, the story you tell yourself about your own life begins to change. The impact is deeper than it appears. When your fatigue is compared, your pain diminished, your joy overshadowed, you internalize the message. Maybe my feelings don't matter. Maybe I am not enough. Over time, this can hollow out self-esteem. It teaches you to silence your own needs before anyone else does. It convinces you that your struggles are trivial, your achievements insignificant, your truth unworthy of voice. The danger of micro-invalidation lies not in a single instance, but in repetition. Like drops of water wearing down stone, these small denials slowly reshape the way you see yourself. And when identity is shaped by dismissal, dependency on others for validation grows stronger. But awareness restores balance. To recognize micro-invalidation is to pause and remind yourself, my experience does not need comparison to be real. My feelings do not need permission to exist. What I feel is valid because I feel it. It is in honoring your own truth, no matter how small others make it seem, that you reclaim the space erosion tried to steal. 24. Flooding, overwhelm tactic. The human mind can only hold so much at once. We process information, juggle emotions, weigh decisions, but there is always a limit. When too much arrives at the same time, clarity dissolves. And in that haze of overload, we become vulnerable. This is the strategy of flooding, also called the overwhelm tactic. It works by delivering an onslaught. Too many words, too many demands, too many emotions, so quickly and forcefully that you cannot keep up. A manipulator may raise multiple accusations at once, giving you no space to respond to any single one. They may drown you in rapid explanations, technicalities, or contradictions until you lose track of the truth. Or they may unleash a storm of emotions, anger, tears, guilt, blame, so intense that you freeze, unable to defend yourself. The goal is not clarity. It is collapse. Because when your mind is flooded, when the weight of information or emotion becomes unbearable, your natural instinct is to seek relief. And often, the quickest relief comes from surrendering. You stop fighting, stop questioning, stop resisting, just to make the noise, the pressure, the storm go away. This is why the tactic is so effective. It bypasses reason, it bypasses discussion, it overwhelms your capacity to think, leaving only the urge to escape. Over time, the pattern becomes predictable. You learn that whenever you raise a concern, you will be met not with dialogue, but with a flood. So you hesitate to speak at all. And in your silence, the manipulator wins, not because their arguments were stronger, but because their volume was louder. The cruelty of flooding is that it disguises itself as intensity. It can make you believe maybe they care so much, maybe that's why it's overwhelming. But love does not require drowning. Care does not demand suffocation. Truth does not hide in chaos. To resist the overwhelm tactic is to recognize it for what it is, not passion, but pressure. It is to pause in the storm and remind yourself, I do not have to respond right now. I do not have to absorb all of this at once. I am allowed to step back, breathe, and choose clarity over chaos. For power lies not in how much someone can say or show at once, but in how clearly truth can be seen when a noise fades. 25. Bait and blame. Not all traps are set with ropes or cages. Some are woven with words, with silence, with subtle provocations. And once you step into them, the roles are reversed. You, the one who was provoked, become the one accused. This is the tactic of bait and blame. It begins with a spark, a sharp comment designed to sting, a passive-aggressive remark slipped into conversation, a small act of disrespect, a rolled eye, a mocking laugh, a deliberate silence. At first, you try to ignore it, but then the pressure builds. Your heart races, your voice rises, your patience breaks. You react because you are human, because you have limits. And in that moment, the trap closes. They step back, suddenly calm, and point the finger. See? You're the one who's angry. Look how unreasonable you are. This is why we can't talk. You always overreact. The very reaction they engineered becomes the evidence against you. The wound they inflicted vanishes from sight, replaced by the spotlight on your response. And now, instead of addressing the original harm, you find yourself defending your reaction, apologizing for raising your voice, explaining why you snapped, proving that you are not the problem, but in the eyes of others, and often in your own, you have already been cast as the aggressor. This is the cruelty of bait and blame. It turns self-defense into self-incrimination. It manipulates not just your behavior, but the story that follows it. And over time, it can make you doubt yourself, asking, maybe I really am too sensitive. Maybe I am the one at fault. The danger is not in the reaction itself. It is in the rewriting of roles. The victim becomes the villain. The instigator becomes the innocent. But awareness reveals the pattern. When you notice the bait, when you feel the subtle provocation, you can pause, you can breathe, you can choose not to step into the trap. And even when you do react, clarity allows you to reclaim the truth. Yes, I reacted, but my reaction did not appear in a vacuum. It was not without cause. And I will not let you erase the spark that lit this fire. For true accountability does not begin with the loudest moment of anger. It begins with the first act of harm. 26. The idealization, devaluation, discard cycle. Some manipulations do not happen in a single moment. They unfold over time, slowly, predictably, and devastatingly. Among the most destructive of these is the idealization, devaluation, discard cycle. It moves in 3 stages. Each stage has its own rhythm, its own cruelty. And together, they form a cycle that leaves the victim drained, confused, and deeply dependent. Stage 1. Idealization. It begins with adoration. You are placed on a pedestal, bathed in praise, treated as if you are extraordinary. Every word you speak seems profound, every action cherished, every flaw overlooked. The manipulator showers you with admiration, attention, and validation. You feel seen in a way you may never have felt before. It is intoxicating, like a flood of sunlight breaking through clouds. This stage is designed to hook you, to make you believe, finally, someone understands me. Finally, I found real connection. It feels like love, but it's not love. It is a setup. Stage 2. Devaluation. The pedestal begins to crumble. The same qualities once praised are now criticized. The quirks that once made you special are now treated as flaws. The warmth fades. replaced by coldness, distance, or outright disdain. A comment that once earned admiration now earns a sigh. A mistake that would have been forgiven with a smile now sparks irritation or ridicule. You try harder, desperate to bring back the glow of stage 1. You replay the early days in your mind, wondering, what happened? How did I lose their love? And so, you bend, you compromise, you give more of yourself, believing that if you just try hard enough, the warmth will return. But that warmth was never yours to hold. It was a tool, carefully used, now withdrawn. Stage 3. Discard. Once the manipulator has drained you of energy, loyalty, or resources, once you're no longer useful or entertaining, they step away. The discard can be abrupt or gradual. It can look like a sudden breakup, a silent withdrawal, or a slow fading of attention until you are left in the dark. The pain of this stage is profound. You are left not only with loss, but with confusion. You wonder if it was your fault, if you failed, if you somehow ruined something beautiful. And that self-doubt binds you even tighter to the memory of stage 1. You may find yourself chasing the ghost of the idealization phase, replaying the warmth, desperate to win it back. And sometimes, just when you begin to let go, the manipulator returns, offering a flicker of affection just enough to restart the cycle. The cycle's cruelty. This cycle is not random. It is intentional. It conditions you to associate love with instability, to mistake chaos for passion, to equate abuse with intimacy. It trains you to believe that worth must be earned, that affection must be chased, that stability is too much to hope for. And the more the cycle repeats, the weaker you feel. Your confidence erodes, your self-esteem withers, and yet, paradoxically, your dependence grows because you cling to the hope that the idealization will return. The truth is, it never truly existed. The pedestal was not a reflection of you. It was a tool of control. The devaluation was not about your flaws. It was about power. And the discard was not abandonment. It was strategy. Breaking the cycle. To escape, one must first see it clearly. To understand that the cycle is not love, not connection, not destiny. It is manipulation disguised as intimacy. Love doesn't exalt only to destroy. Love doesn't praise only to punish. Love doesn't abandon when it no longer gains. Real love is steady, consistent, patient. It doesn't move in cycles of worship and rejection. It grows, it deepens, it endures. The moment you see the pattern for what it is, you can take the first step out of the loop. And in that step, you begin to reclaim what the cycle tried to erase. Your worth, your dignity, your freedom. 27. Empathy weaponization. Empathy is one of the most beautiful qualities of the human heart. It is the ability to feel another's pain, to imagine their struggle, to soften in the face of suffering. Empathy connects us, heals us, and allows compassion to bloom. But like all beautiful things, empathy can be twisted. When used as a shield against accountability, it ceases to be a bridge of connection and becomes a weapon. This is the tactic of empathy weaponization. It often appears in moments of conflict. You bring up a hurt, a broken promise, a betrayal. You want clarity, accountability, or change. But instead of meeting your words with responsibility, they redirect the spotlight onto their own suffering. You don't understand what I've been through. If you knew my past, you'd forgive me. I've already suffered so much. How can you blame me now? And just like that, the focus shifts. No longer is the conversation about the harm they caused. It is about the pain they endured. No longer are you the one who was hurt. You are now the one who must comfort. The tactic works because empathy is powerful. Your heart softens. Your anger dissolves into guilt. You silence your own needs, thinking they've already suffered enough. I shouldn't make it worse. But in this exchange, something crucial is lost. Truth. Responsibility vanishes. The harm done to you is left unaddressed, swept aside beneath the weight of their tragic story. The cruelty of empathy weaponization is not in the sharing of pain. Many of us carry deep wounds. The cruelty is in using that pain as a shield to avoid accountability, to escape responsibility, to silence the valid hurt of another. And over time, the pattern deepens. You become conditioned to forgive quickly, to excuse harmful behavior, to prioritize their suffering over your own well-being. Your empathy, instead of being a source of strength, becomes a chain that keeps you bound. But here is the truth. Having a difficult past does not excuse causing harm in the present. Pain explains. It does not justify. Suffering shapes us, but it does not absolve us of responsibility for our choices. To see this tactic clearly is to reclaim your empathy as a gift, not a weakness. It is to say, I can acknowledge your pain, but I will not let it erase mine. I can understand your story, but I will not let it excuse your actions. True empathy does not silence truth. True compassion does not erase accountability. And true healing comes not from hiding behind pain, but from facing it with honesty. 28. Shame, anchoring. Shame is one of the heaviest emotions a human being can carry. Unlike guilt, which says, I did something bad, shame whispers something deeper, something darker. I am bad. And because it attacks the core of identity, shame can linger long after the moment has passed. The tactic of shame anchoring exploits this very vulnerability. It works by attaching shame to a specific behavior, action, or even desire. A manipulator seizes on a moment when you are vulnerable, and they mark it not just with disapproval, but with humiliation. Maybe as a child, you raised your voice with excitement, only to be told, stop embarrassing yourself. Nobody wants to hear you. Maybe as an adult, you expressed an opinion, and someone cut you down with ridicule. That's ridiculous. Do you even hear yourself? Or perhaps you dared to dream out loud, and the response was laughter, mockery, or scorn. The words pass quickly for them, but for you, the memory takes root. It fuses with the behavior itself. And now, each time you approach a similar moment, each time you try to speak up or celebrate or take space, the echo of shame returns. This is how shame anchoring works. It plants an emotional trigger inside you, so that even without the presence, the anchor holds. You silence yourself, not because they are silencing you now, but because they silenced you once so deeply that the wound became self-sustaining. The cruelty is in the longevity. One act of humiliation can ripple through years, even decades. It convinces you that self-expression is dangerous, that joy is foolish, that vulnerability is weakness. And so, you shrink, you hold back, you censor your own light, afraid that stepping forward will once again bring the crushing weight of shame. But here lies the truth. The shame was never truly yours. It was planted, engineered, anchored to you by someone who used humiliation as control. To break free, one must see the anchor for what it is, a false connection between behavior and worth. Speaking up does not equal shame. Dreaming does not equal humiliation. Your being is not embarrassing. It is human, alive, worthy. When you recognize the anchor, you can begin to cut its rope. You can stand in the space that once felt forbidden and remind yourself, this action does not define me. The shame was never mine to carry. And in that moment of clarity, the old echo begins to fade. What remains is not silence, but freedom. The freedom to speak, to act, to live without the weight of borrowed humiliation. 29. Unpredictable reward system. The human heart longs for recognition. A kind word, a gentle smile, a small gesture of appreciation. These things nourish us, reminding us that we are seen, valued, and loved. But when recognition becomes erratic, when rewards appear and vanish without pattern, something strange and dangerous begins to happen. This is the unpredictable reward system. It works much like a game of chance. Sometimes your efforts are met with praise, affection, or approval. Other times, with silence, coldness, or rejection. And crucially, you never know which one it will be. One day, your partner showers you with affection for something simple, like making dinner. The next day, you do the same thing, and they barely acknowledge it. At work, a colleague might applaud your idea in one meeting, then dismiss the very same idea as unrealistic in another. This inconsistency keeps you off balance. It teaches you that affection and approval are not guaranteed. They must be earned, chased, fought for. And here lies the trap. The brain responds most strongly to unpredictable rewards. This is the same principle that drives gambling addiction. When the slot machine pays out every time, it becomes boring. When it never pays out, players walk away. But when it pays out unpredictably every now and then, it creates obsession. So too in relationships. The rare moments of praise, the sudden bursts of affection become jackpots. You cling to them, replay them in your mind, chase them with even greater effort. And even when coldness dominates, you stay, believing that if you just try harder, the warmth will return. Over time, this system creates emotional dependency. You stop asking whether the relationship itself is healthy. You only ask, how can I win the reward again? Your self-worth becomes tied to their unpredictable signals until you can no longer tell whether you are loved for who you are or simply trained by the cycle. The cruelty of this tactic is that it feels alive, exciting, even passionate. The highs are so high that they eclipse the lows, at least in memory. You tell yourself, see, they do care. Look at how much love they gave me that day. But the reality is that the inconsistency is not proof of love. It is proof of manipulation. True love does not come and go like a slot machine. Real care is not rationed unpredictably to keep you chasing. Healthy connection is steady, warm, reliable, not a gamble you lose more than you win. To break free, you must see the pattern for what it is, not passion, but control. And in that clarity, you can step away from the cycle, choosing not to gamble for love, but to seek the steady light of connection that does not flicker. 30. Phantom norms. Every society, every family, every relationship has its rules, some spoken, some unspoken. Clear rules create stability. They help us understand what is expected, what is fair, what is right. But what happens when the rules are invisible, constantly shifting and known only to one person? This is the manipulation of phantom norms. It begins subtly. You're told you did something wrong, but when you ask what the rule was, the answer is vague. You are corrected, criticized, or shamed for failing to meet an expectation you never knew existed. One day, silence is considered respectful. The next day, it is taken as indifference. One moment, showing initiative is praised. The next, it is condemned as overstepping. The rules change without warning. And each time, you are left scrambling to adjust, desperate to align yourself with the standard you cannot see. The power of phantom norms lies in their invisibility. Because you cannot anticipate them, you are always on edge, always waiting to be told what you did wrong. And the more you are told, the more you internalize the message. I am the problem. I never get it right. I must try harder. Over time, this creates a state of hypervigilance. You second-guess every word, every gesture, every choice, fearful of breaking another invisible rule. Your sense of self erodes, replaced by a constant need for their approval, the only marker of whether you are right or wrong. The cruelty is that these phantom norms are not meant to guide you. They are meant to control you. By keeping the rules hidden, the manipulator ensures that you can never feel secure, never feel equal, never feel free. You remain a player in a game where the rules are rewritten at will, and only they hold the rulebook. But here is the truth. Fairness requires clarity. Respect requires transparency. Love does not thrive in invisible prisons. To break free from phantom norms is to reclaim your right to stability. It is to say, if the rules are never clear, then the problem is not me. It is the system itself. I do not have to keep chasing approval when the finish line is designed to move. For real connection does not punish you with mysteries. It welcomes you with honesty. And in that honesty, freedom lives. 31. Echoic agreement trap. There are few things more comforting than being understood. When someone nods as you speak, when their words mirror your own, when they say, I feel exactly the same, it feels like a meeting of souls. Like finally, you are not alone in your thoughts. But what if that agreement is not real? What if it is an echo, carefully crafted not to connect with you, but to disarm you? This is the manipulation of the echoic agreement trap. It works by creating the illusion of perfect alignment. The manipulator listens closely, not to understand, but to imitate. They reflect your words back to you, paraphrasing your feelings, echoing your frustrations, mirroring your worldview. You say, I feel like people never really listen. They reply, exactly, I feel that all the time. No one truly listens to me either. You confess, sometimes I feel insecure about my choices. They nod and respond, yes, me too. I know exactly how that feels. Each echo draws you in deeper. You begin to think, finally, someone who understands me completely. And in that sense of shared experience, you lower your guard. Walls that might have taken months to soften collapse within days. But the purpose of the echo is not intimacy. It is extraction. While you open up, sharing secrets, fears, and vulnerabilities, they are collecting. Every detail becomes material, leverage to use later, information to manipulate, or simply a tool to bind you closer. The danger of this tactic lies in how natural it feels. Because humans are wired to trust similarity, to bond with those who mirror us. And yet, when that mirroring is hollow, it becomes a trap designed to pull you into false closeness while they remain detached, calculating. Over time, you may notice cracks. Their agreement never deepens into true empathy. Their echoes never evolve into authentic action. And when you need more than words, real support, real care, the illusion begins to crumble. But by then, You may already have shared too much, and the very truths you revealed in your moment of trust may now be used against you. To resist the echoic agreement trap is to slow down when someone seems too perfectly aligned. To ask, are they truly sharing themselves, or are they only reflecting me? For true connection is not an echo chamber. It is a dialogue. It includes difference as well as similarity, honesty as well as agreement. Real empathy does not need to mimic your every word. It shows itself not only in what is said, but in what is done. And when you remember this, the false echo loses its power to bind you. 32. False scarcity illusion. Human beings are wired to value what feels rare. Gold, diamonds, precious artifacts. These things capture our imagination not only because of their beauty, but because they are scarce. And when scarcity enters the realm of relationships, it becomes even more powerful. This is the manipulation of the false scarcity illusion. It begins when someone makes their affection, attention, or approval feel like a limited resource. Not freely given, not steady, but rare. Something you must earn, something you must compete for, something that might vanish if you are not careful. They may say things like, I don't open up to just anyone. People are always letting me down. I only stay close to those who are truly special. My time is extremely limited. You should feel lucky I'm giving it to you. Each phrase creates the impression that their love is rare, fragile, conditional. And because we fear loss, because we crave connection, we lean in closer, trying harder, giving more of ourselves to secure what feels scarce. This illusion works because it hijacks one of our deepest instincts. The human brain evolved to respond urgently to scarcity. When food was rare, we hunted harder. When survival was uncertain, we clung tighter to every resource. That same instinct now applies to affection. When it feels limited, we chase it as if our survival depends on it. But here is the truth. In false scarcity, the resource is not truly rare. It is made rare on purpose. The manipulator withholds affection, withdraws attention, or limits validation, not because they cannot give it, but because they want you to believe it is scarce. And in that belief, you will bend, compromise, even surrender pieces of yourself just to avoid losing what little they offer. The cruelty of this tactic lies in how it reshapes your sense of worth. You begin to feel that love is not a right, but a prize. That attention is not natural, but conditional. That your value depends not on who you are, but on how hard you can hold on to what they withhold. Over time, this can make you panic at the thought of losing them. Even when the relationship feels toxic, you stay, because the scarcity convinces you that what little you receive is more than you might ever find again. But here lies the liberation. Love is not meant to be rare. Affection is not a treasure to be rationed. True connection flows freely. It does not dangle itself as bait. To recognize false scarcity is to reclaim your worth. It is to say, love is not something I must beg for. Attention is not something I must gamble for. I deserve steadiness, not scraps. Because love, when it is real, does not arrive as a rare prize. It arrives as a steady presence, not scarce, but abundant. Not rationed, but given. 33. Tactical praise. Withdrawal. Praise has immense power. A kind word, a nod of approval, a gentle recognition. It affirms our worth. It nourishes our confidence. It reminds us that our efforts matter. When genuine, praise uplifts. But when weaponized, praise can become a chain. This is the tactic of tactical praise withdrawal. It begins with generosity. At first, you are showered with compliments. Every action is noticed, every effort applauded. The manipulator makes you feel special, unique, valuable. You begin to thrive under the light of their recognition. But then, suddenly, without warning, the praise vanishes. The same effort that once earned admiration now receives silence. The same gestures that once drew smiles now pass unnoticed. And when you look for acknowledgement, it is withheld. This withdrawal is not random, it is deliberate. By pulling back their praise, they create a hunger in you. You begin to question yourself, what did I do wrong? Why don't they see me anymore? How can I win their approval back? And so, you try harder. You overextend yourself. You chase recognition, pushing beyond your limits in the hope of once again hearing the words that once came so easily. Well done. I'm proud of you. You matter. The manipulator does not need to demand obedience. They only need to control when and how they give recognition. Because once you are hooked, the absence of praise feels unbearable. And you will bend yourself in countless ways just to earn back what was taken. The cruelty of this tactic lies in its invisibility. From the outside, nothing seems harsh. There is no insult, no open criticism, only silence. But silence can cut just as deep as words. And the absence of praise, after you've grown used to it, can feel like rejection, abandonment, even punishment. Over time, this cycle creates dependency. Your sense of worth becomes tied not to who you are, but to their approval. You measure your value not by your own standards, but by whether or not they choose to validate you. But here is the truth. Your worth is not conditional. Recognition withheld does not erase your value. Praise withdrawn does not mean you are less. To break free is to reclaim the authority to validate yourself, to remind yourself, my effort matters even if unrecognized. My voice matters even if unheard. My worth is not something another person can give or take away. For true affirmation is steady. True appreciation does not vanish without cause. And true love never withholds praise as a weapon. 34. Distorted reciprocity. Reciprocity is one of the most natural laws of human connection. When someone gives to us, we feel moved to give back. When someone helps us, we want to return the kindness. This cycle of mutual exchange builds trust, deepens bonds, and creates balance. But when reciprocity is twisted, it no longer nurtures, it controls. This is the tactic of distorted reciprocity. It often begins with a gesture. They do something generous, unexpected, perhaps even grand. A favor, a gift, a sacrifice. And at first, you feel gratitude, genuine and warm. But later, when you draw a boundary or hesitate to comply with their request, the memory of that favor is brought back with force. After everything I have done for you, this is how you repay me. I gave you so much, and you can't even do this one thing for me? Don't forget who was there for you when no one else was. What began as kindness is now leveraged as currency. The gift is no longer a gift. It has become a contract, and your gratitude is transformed into obligation. This distorted reciprocity works because gratitude is powerful. Most of us want to honor what others have done for us. We feel uncomfortable being in debt. And so, even when the demand is unfair, even when the favor they call upon crosses our boundaries, we comply, just to relieve the pressure of owing them. But here lies the cruelty. True generosity expects nothing in return. When kindness becomes a weapon, it was never kindness to begin with. It was bait. Over time, distorted reciprocity can create a cycle of guilt and submission. You begin to feel that you can never repay enough, never give enough, never balance the invisible ledger they hold over you. The more you try, the deeper the debt seems to grow. And slowly, gratitude, the very thing that should bring joy, becomes a chain. But here is the truth. Love does not keep score. Real generosity is free of hooks, and true kindness does not turn into a weapon the moment you resist. To break free from distorted reciprocity is to reclaim your right to gratitude without obligation. It is to say, I can be thankful for what you gave, but I do not owe you my freedom. I do not owe you my boundaries, and I will not let gratitude be twisted into submission. Because when giving is real, it uplifts both the giver and the receiver. And when it is distorted, it was never about giving at all. It was about control. 35. Cognitive load disruption. The human mind is powerful, but it is not limitless. We can only process so much information at once. Too many choices, too many details, too many calculations, and our ability to think clearly begins to collapse. Confusion sets in. Fatigue follows. And in that exhaustion, we are far more likely to surrender than to resist. This is the manipulation of cognitive load disruption. It works by overwhelming you with complexity. Instead of presenting a single, clear issue, the manipulator floods you with countless details, endless scenarios, or multiple options that all demand analysis. A simple conversation about plans becomes a labyrinth of possibilities, schedules, exceptions, and what-ifs. A contract becomes 20 pages of dense language, legal jargon, and hidden clauses. A disagreement turns into a storm of arguments, counter-arguments, statistics, and distractions, so many that you can no longer track what the original point even was. The result? Mental exhaustion. Your brain, drained by the effort of keeping up, begins to crave escape. And the easiest escape is to stop resisting, to nod, to agree, to accept the solution that is already waiting, the one that just happens to benefit them most. The tactic is cruel in its elegance. They don't need to silence you. They only need to drown you in so much noise that your clarity drowns itself. They don't need to take away your power. They simply bury it under a mountain of cognitive fatigue until handing it over feels like relief. Over time, this creates a dangerous pattern. You may begin to doubt your own ability to handle complexity. You might think, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I can't make decisions. And so, you lean more and more on them, trusting their simplified solution, unaware that it was designed to lead you exactly where they wanted. But here lies the truth. Complexity is not always accidental. Sometimes it is constructed, carefully woven to break down your resistance. The way out is to pause, to refuse the pressure of immediacy, to say, I will not decide right now. I need time to think, because when you step back, when you give your mind space to breathe, the fog begins to clear. And in that clarity, you see that the obvious solution they offered was never the only one. It was simply the one they wanted you to choose. True fairness does not fear simplicity. True honesty does not hide in confusion. And true respect does not exhaust your mind to win your compliance. 36. Fear then relief technique. Fear is one of the oldest emotions in the human experience. It sharpens our senses, quickens our heartbeat, and prepares us to react. But fear is also exhausting. Our bodies are not meant to stay in that heightened state for long. And when the fear is suddenly removed, the relief is overwhelming. This is the essence of the fear then relief technique. It begins with a threat, real or imagined. A sudden announcement, a harsh tone, a looming warning that triggers anxiety. We need to talk about your future here. This situation is serious. You might be in real trouble. Something very bad just happened, and it involves you. Your heart races, your mind scrambles. Adrenaline floods your body as you prepare for confrontation, punishment, or loss. And then, just as the fear peaks, it disappears. I'm just kidding. It's not really that bad. Relax, I didn't mean it that way. The threat vanishes, and in its place, a flood of relief crashes over you. Your shoulders loosen, your breath steadies, your entire body sighs with release. And in that fragile, emotional moment, something strange happens. Instead of resenting the one who frightened you, you feel gratitude. Gratitude that the danger is gone. Gratitude that you were spared. Gratitude toward the very person who put you in fear in the first place. This is what makes the tactic so effective. The manipulator controls both ends of the emotional spectrum. First, they create the fear. Then, they remove it. And in doing so, they gain not just compliance, but often loyalty. Because after such an emotional swing, your brain learns a dangerous association. They are the ones who can both hurt me and save me. Over time, this cycle reshapes your responses. You stop resisting. You stop questioning. You comply more easily, not out of reason, but out of the hope of avoiding fear and the desperate desire to feel relief. The cruelty of this technique lies in its invisibility. To outsiders, it may look like a harmless joke, a moment of tension quickly resolved. But inside, the nervous system has been trained. Resistance equals fear, obedience equals safety. The way to break free is to recognize the manipulation for what it is, a manufactured crisis followed by a staged rescue, and to remind yourself, the person who frightened me cannot be the one I owe gratitude to. Relief does not erase the harm of fear. True care does not toy with your emotions. True love does not terrify just to comfort. And real trust is never built on the cycle of panic and release. 37. Foot in the mouth technique. Kindness is one of our most natural instincts. When someone shows vulnerability, when they reveal hardship, our first impulse is to soften, to care, to extend a hand. It is a beautiful part of being human. But what happens when that very kindness is turned into a tool for control? This is the essence of the foot in the mouth technique. It begins with a simple question, gentle, disarming. How are you doing today? You must be tired. Are you okay? At first it feels genuine, even considerate. You feel noticed, cared for, respected. Your heart opens, your defenses drop, and in that moment of softened guard, the true purpose is revealed. A request. Since you're already helping, could you do me one more favor? I hate to ask, but could you take care of this for me? I wouldn't normally ask, but you're so capable, I know you'll understand. The request may not be unreasonable, but it did not arrive honestly. It was ushered in through your empathy, through your instinct to respond kindly to concern. This is how the foot in the mouth technique works. It weaponizes compassion. By starting with empathy, the manipulator creates a temporary bond, a moment of emotional openness. And once your heart is open, they slip in their demand, knowing you are far more likely to comply. The danger is not in the request itself, it is in the pattern. Over time, you may find yourself constantly giving, constantly yielding, constantly saying yes to things you might otherwise refuse, simply because you were first disarmed by care. It is subtle, almost invisible. From the outside, it looks like kindness, followed by a small favor. But inside, it creates a cycle. Empathy first, compliance second. And each time you comply, the association grows stronger in your mind. Responding to vulnerability equals saying yes. But here is the truth. Real empathy does not demand repayment. Real kindness is not bait for obligation. And true care does not come with strings hidden beneath the surface. To see this tactic clearly is to pause when empathy is used as an entry point. To remind yourself, I can care without complying. I can listen without agreeing. My compassion is not a contract. For kindness is most powerful when it flows freely, not when it is quietly turned into a weapon against the very heart that gave it. 38. Forced teaming humans are social creatures. We are wired to seek belonging, to trust those who speak of shared goals, shared struggles, shared identity. The words we, us, and together have the power to soften walls and open doors. But this instinct, so deeply human, can be exploited. This is the manipulation of forced teaming. It begins with language. Instead of I and you, the manipulator uses we. Instead of your problem, it becomes our problem. Instead of my plan, it becomes what we need to do. On the surface, it feels harmless, even flattering. It creates a sense of alliance, of unity, of being on the same side. And in that feeling of togetherness, your guard lowers. But beneath the surface, there is no real partnership. The goals are not truly shared. The burdens are not truly mutual. The team exists only in words, not in reality. Imagine a co-worker saying, "We really need to stay late tonight," when in truth, it is their project, their responsibility, their burden. By framing it as we, they subtly shift responsibility onto you. Or in a personal relationship, we need to be more careful with spending, when in reality, the overspending is theirs alone. The shared language masks an individual problem, dragging you into a false sense of joint responsibility. The danger of forced teaming lies in its subtlety. It rarely feels threatening. In fact, it often feels cooperative, even kind. But slowly, it blurs boundaries. You begin to carry loads that are not yours, accept duties you never agreed to, and align yourself with decisions that do not benefit you. Over time, the phrase, "we're in this together," becomes a cage. Because each time you resist, it feels like betrayal, not just of them, but of the team you never truly chose to join. But here is the truth. Real teams are built, not imposed. Real cooperation is chosen, not manufactured with clever words. And true partnership thrives on honesty, not on false unity. To resist forced teaming is to notice the language. When someone says, "we," ask yourself, is this truly ours or is it theirs, dressed up in shared clothing? For trust built on illusion is not trust at all. And no bond, whether at work, in friendship, or in love, should require you to mistake manipulation for partnership. 39. Identity undermining. Who we are is not built in a single moment. Our identity is shaped over years through passions, values, dreams, quirks, even the small habits that make us feel uniquely ourselves. This sense of self is our compass, guiding us through choices, relationships, and challenges. But what happens when that compass is slowly broken, not with force, but with whispers? This is the manipulation of identity undermining. It does not arrive as a grand attack. It creeps in through small, seemingly harmless comments. You're so dramatic. You always overthink everything. Why do you even like that hobby? It's kind of silly. At first, you might laugh it off. You might even agree, thinking they're just teasing. But repeated over time, these remarks begin to chip away at the edges of your self-image. The books you once loved now feel childish because they mocked them. The clothes that once made you confident now feel inappropriate because they belittled them. The dreams you once held proudly now feel foolish because they dismissed them. Slowly, without realizing it, you start shrinking. You silence parts of yourself. You give up hobbies, abandon ambitions, suppress quirks, all in the name of avoiding criticism, all to preserve harmony. But in the process, your sense of self begins to dissolve. You wake up one day and wonder, who am I, if not the person they allow me to be? This is the cruelty of identity undermining. It doesn't just attack your confidence, it erases your foundation. It makes you dependent on the manipulator for validation because the self you once trusted has been dismantled piece by piece. And perhaps the most dangerous part is how invisible it feels. Unlike open insults, these remarks often sound subtle, even playful. But they are not jokes, they are erosion. Over time, what began as light comments become heavy chains. And the more you adapt to fit their view, the further you drift from your own. But here is the truth. Your identity is not defined by someone else's remarks. The passions, quirks, and dreams that bring you joy are not flaws. They are your compass. To reclaim them is to reclaim yourself. Breaking free from identity undermining begins with recognition. To hear those subtle cuts and respond inwardly, no, that is not who I am. My joy is not foolish. My passion is not weakness. My dreams are not invalid. For identity is not meant to be handed over. It is meant to be lived, protected, and cherished by you, for you. 40. Victim playing. There are times in life when we are truly hurt, when pain is real and suffering undeniable. To share that pain with others is natural. It invites care, empathy, and connection. But when suffering is performed, when victimhood is worn like a mask for advantage, it ceases to be truth and becomes manipulation. This is the tactic of victim playing. It begins in moments of conflict. You raise a concern, perhaps about dishonesty, betrayal, or neglect. But instead of meeting your words with responsibility, they collapse into a performance of hurt. I guess I am always the bad one. Why do you hate me so much? No one ever understands how hard I have it. Suddenly, the focus shifts. The harm they caused disappears from the spotlight. In its place is their sadness, their tears, their indignation. And instead of holding them accountable, you find yourself defending, explaining, even comforting them. Your anger turns into guilt. Your clarity dissolves into confusion. What began as their betrayal becomes your lack of compassion. This is the cruel genius of victim playing. It inverts roles. The one who caused harm becomes the wounded. The one who was harmed becomes the heartless. And because humans are wired for empathy, the tactic works. Most of us do not want to see someone suffer. We soften, we back down, we apologize, even when we were the ones wronged. Over time, this cycle erodes accountability entirely. Every confrontation ends the same way, with you feeling guilty and them escaping responsibility. And in the end, you may begin to believe the narrative yourself, that you are too harsh, too demanding, too cold. But here is the truth. Real victimhood does not erase responsibility. Suffering is not an excuse to harm others, and empathy, while sacred, is not meant to be a shield against accountability. To recognize victim playing is to hold firm when the spotlight shifts. To remind yourself, their pain does not erase their actions. Their tears do not undo the harm. I can acknowledge their feelings without abandoning my truth. Because true healing comes not from pretending innocence, but from owning mistakes. And true compassion does not require you to sacrifice justice for comfort. 41. Halo effect exploitation. Human perception is rarely neutral. When we admire one quality in a person, our minds often extend that admiration into other areas, sometimes without evidence, sometimes against all reason. This is the halo effect, the tendency to let one shining trait cast light over everything else. But when this natural bias is deliberately exploited, it becomes a tool of manipulation. This is the tactic of halo effect exploitation. It begins with a highlight, one quality polished so brightly that it blinds us to the rest. Perhaps it is physical beauty, so striking that it commands attention. Perhaps it is intelligence, wit, or eloquence which makes every word sound trustworthy. Perhaps it is success or status which makes us believe they must know what they're doing. They must be good. Whatever the trait, it becomes the anchor of perception. And because that single quality shines, we assume the rest must shine too. The manipulator relies on this. They do not need to hide their flaws. They only need to dazzle us with one brilliance, knowing our minds will fill in the rest. Their charm masks their cruelty. Their beauty hides their dishonesty. Their success overshadows their selfishness. And so, we trust too quickly, forgive too easily, overlook too much. The danger of halo effect exploitation lies not only in misplaced trust, but in blindness to warning signs. Red flags wave, but we dismiss them. They couldn't mean harm. They're too kind, too smart, too accomplished. We excuse behaviors we would never tolerate from others, simply because one trait keeps us enchanted. Over time, this illusion deepens. The manipulator becomes untouchable, protected by the glow of their curated image. And when the mask finally slips, when the darkness behind the halo emerges, the shock is profound because we realize we were never seeing the whole person, only the reflection they allowed. But here is the truth. No single trait defines a person. Beauty does not guarantee kindness. Intelligence does not ensure an honesty. Success does not equal integrity. To resist this manipulation is to separate admiration from trust. To remind yourself, yes, they may be brilliant or beautiful or accomplished, but what do their actions reveal? What lives in the shadows beyond the glow? For true character is not found in the trait that dazzles, but in the choices made when no spotlight shines. And when you learn to look past the halo, you begin to see the person as they truly are, not as the illusion they crafted. 42. Desensitization by gradual exposure. Most boundaries are not broken all at once. They are worn down, slowly, patiently, until what once seemed unthinkable begins to feel almost ordinary. This is the tactic of desensitization by gradual exposure. It never begins with the extreme. The manipulator knows that if they cross the line too far, too soon, you would resist. So instead, they start small, subtle violations, slight offenses, tiny acts of disrespect. A sarcastic remark passed off as a joke, a small lie that seems harmless. A minor boundary crossed, brushed aside with, "Don't overreact, it's not a big deal." At first you notice, you might even protest, but each time your reaction is met with dismissal, or worse, blame. And over time, exhaustion sets in. It becomes easier to ignore the small breaches than to confront them. Then the violations escalate. What once shocked you now feels familiar. What once angered you now feels tolerable. The outrageous becomes ordinary, not because it changed, but because you did. This is the cruelty of gradual exposure. It trains your nervous system to stop reacting. Your inner alarms, once loud and urgent, begin to grow quiet. Your instinct to resist weakens, not because the harm is less, but because you have been conditioned to endure. Psychologists call this habituation, the process by which repeated exposure dulls response. It's the same principle that makes a loud clock fade into background noise after enough time. But here, it is not sound that fades. It is your sense of what is right. And once you are desensitized, the manipulator has free rein. The very behaviors that once would have sent you running now keep you bound because they feel normal. But here is the truth. Harm does not become harmless simply because it is repeated. Disrespect does not become acceptable simply because it is familiar. Normality is not proof of safety. It is often proof of conditioning. To break free is to awaken your sense of proportion again. To pause and ask, if I saw this happening to someone I love, would I still call it normal? That question pulls you out of the fog, reminding you that just because something has become familiar does not mean it is right. For love does not require you to grow numb, and respect does not demand that you accept what once broke your heart. 43. Mirroring vulnerabilities. True intimacy is built on honesty. When we reveal our wounds, our fears, or our past struggles, we open the most fragile parts of ourselves. And when someone meets that openness with their own truth, trust begins to grow. But what happens when that trust is not real? When your vulnerability is not met with authenticity, but with imitation? This is the manipulation of mirroring vulnerabilities. It often begins when you share something personal, a fear, a childhood scar, a moment of shame. And almost instantly, they respond with a story that sounds eerily familiar. You say, "I sometimes feel abandoned." They reply, "Me too. I've always struggled with abandonment." You confess, "I feel insecure about this part of myself." They nod deeply and say, "I know exactly how that feels. I felt the same all my life." At first, it feels like a gift. Finally, someone who understands. Finally, someone whose scars match yours. The connection feels instant, powerful, undeniable. But beneath the surface, something else is happening. They are not revealing the truth. They are reflecting yours. They are constructing an illusion of intimacy, using your own pain as the blueprint. The purpose is not to bond, but to disarm. The more you believe they share your wounds, the more you trust them. The more you trust them, the more you reveal. And the more you reveal, the more power they hold. This is the cruelty of mirroring vulnerabilities. It creates the illusion of deep connection where none exists. It accelerates trust, bypassing the slow, natural process by which intimacy should grow. And in that false closeness, you open your heart to someone who has given you nothing real in return. Over time, the illusion can be devastating. When the mask eventually slips, you realize that the bond you cherished was one-sided, built not on mutual sharing, but on manipulation. And worse, the very wounds you revealed may now be used against you. But here is the truth. Real intimacy does not need to be rushed. It doesn't appear as a perfect mirror of your every scar. It unfolds slowly, unevenly, with differences as well as similarities. To protect yourself is to notice when a bond feels too instant, too precise, too perfectly aligned with your pain. To ask, are they truly sharing themselves, or are they only reflecting me? For genuine connection does not mimic, it reveals. It is not an echo, but a voice. And when it is real, you will feel the difference. Not the thrill of instant trust, but the steady warmth of truth. 44. Reverse mirroring. We all long to be seen, to encounter someone who understands our quirks, our rhythms, our way of being. It feels like recognition, as if the universe has finally placed us before a true kindred spirit. And yet, what if that recognition is not truth, but a reflection carefully constructed to win your trust? This is the manipulation of reverse mirroring. Unlike natural similarity, which happens by chance, reverse mirroring is deliberate. The manipulator does not show you who they are. Instead, they take pieces of you, your gestures, your interests, your language, your energy, and reflect them back. If you are soft-spoken, they soften their tone. If you are lively, they become animated. If you share a passion for books, suddenly they are avid readers too. If you confess a dream, they always wanted the same thing. At first it feels uncanny in the best way. You think, finally, someone who understands me completely, someone who feels like home. The resonance is so strong that you mistake it for compatibility. But in reality, you're not falling for them. You're falling for yourself, reflected back at you. You're not bonding with their truth. You're bonding with an illusion they built from your own image. The danger of reverse mirroring lies in how seductive it feels. Because the more you see yourself in them, the more you trust them. And the more you trust them, the deeper you invest, emotionally, physically, even financially, believing you have found your perfect match. But in truth, nothing about the reflection is stable. Since it was never real, it cannot endure. When the mask eventually slips, the person behind it feels like a stranger, because that is exactly what they always were. Over time, the damage can be profound. You are left doubting your own ability to judge character. You may even feel betrayed by yourself, because the love you thought you found was only a carefully constructed mirror. But here is the truth. Real connection is never flawless reflection. It includes differences, contradictions, even disagreements. It is not about finding someone who echoes you perfectly. It is about finding someone who reveals themselves honestly, even when it is not convenient. To guard against reverse mirroring is to pay attention not only to similarities, but to depth. To ask, are they showing me their own world or only reflecting mine back to me? Because true intimacy is not found in the mirror. It is found in the meeting of two real, distinct selves. And love, when it is real, is not a reflection of you. It is the recognition of another. 45. Social proof. Hoaxing human beings are tribal by nature. From the earliest days of survival, our ancestors relied on groups for safety, food, and belonging. To be excluded was dangerous. To be part of the group meant life. This ancient instinct still shapes us today. We are far more likely to trust what everyone believes, even when our inner voice whispers otherwise. This is what makes social proof hoaxing so powerful. It begins with the manipulator fabricating consensus. They claim support, agreement, or admiration that may not exist. Everyone thinks this is the right choice. All the experts agree with me. Honestly, most people already see it this way. You're the only one questioning it. At first, the words may sound casual, almost throwaway. But the effect is immediate. Your brain, primed for social survival, feels the pressure of being the outsider. You begin to doubt your own judgment. If everyone else agrees, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. The tactic works because the human mind craves alignment with the group. We want to belong, to avoid rejection, to feel safe in the shelter of collective belief. And so, even when the consensus is false or exaggerated, we bend toward it, silencing doubts, reshaping opinions, and sometimes even betraying our own truth. The cruelty of social proof. Hoaxing lies in its invisibility. It does not silence you with force. It nudges you into silence by making you feel alone. It does not prove its argument. It convinces you that the argument has already been won. And in that illusion, you surrender, not because you are persuaded, but because you feared isolation. Over time, this tactic erodes self-trust. You learn to prioritize imagined consensus over your own reason. You silence your inner compass, waiting always for the safety of what others think. But here is the truth. Everyone is often a mask. Consensus can be manufactured, statistics twisted, voices invented. And even if the majority believes something, that does not make it true, nor does it make your perspective worthless. To resist this manipulation is to pause when you hear the words, "everyone agrees," to ask, who exactly is everyone? Where is the proof? And even if they all believe this, what do I believe? For truth is not a popularity contest, and integrity is not measured by how many stand beside you, but by your willingness to stand, even if you must stand alone. 46. Artificial authority, creation authority, shapes perception. When someone appears to hold power, expertise, or prestige, we instinctively lean toward trust. We assume that status equals truth, that confidence equals competence, that recognition equals reliability. But what if that authority is not real, only constructed to control? This is the manipulation of artificial authority creation. It begins with an image. The manipulator presents themselves as someone of influence, respect, or expertise, whether or not it is true. Perhaps they display unverified credentials. I studied under the best in the field. I've been doing this for decades. You should just trust me. Perhaps they name-drop connections. I work closely with some very important people. Everyone in the industry knows me. Or perhaps they rely on confidence alone, delivering statements with such certainty that questioning them feels almost foolish. The brilliance of this tactic is that it requires very little proof. Because humans are conditioned to defer to authority, the mere appearance of expertise often silences doubt. If someone speaks like a leader, dresses like a leader, or claims the title of a leader, we are more likely to believe them, even without evidence. Over time, this illusion of authority can reshape the entire dynamic. You begin to rely on their judgment, even when it contradicts your instincts. You silence your questions, assuming they must know better. Their confidence becomes your evidence, and their false authority becomes your truth. The danger lies not just in misplaced trust, but in dependency. Once you accept their authority, every challenge you feel is turned inward. If I don't understand, it must be me. If I disagree, maybe I'm ignorant. And slowly, you surrender more and more of your own power. But here is the truth. Authority without transparency is a mask. Real expertise does not fear questions. It welcomes them. True leaders do not demand submission through inflated titles or vague claims. They earn respect through clarity, honesty, and consistency. To resist artificial authority is to remember that confidence is not proof, and prestige is not integrity. To pause and ask, where is the evidence? What actions support these words? Does the authority exist beyond the story they tell? For genuine authority is never self-declared. It is recognized through truth. And when you see clearly, the illusion of false power loses its grip. 47. False flattery. Genuine praise is nourishing. It uplifts the spirit, affirms our worth, and strengthens bonds. A simple compliment, spoken with sincerity, can brighten a day and remind us that we are seen. But when praise is hollow, when it is given not to honor but to control, it ceases to be kindness. This is the manipulation of false flattery. It begins with words that feel sweet, perhaps even overwhelming. You're the smartest person I know. No one else could ever compare to you. You always get everything right. At first, these compliments are intoxicating. You feel valued, unique, even extraordinary. But beneath the surface, the flattery is not admiration. It is strategy. Because false flattery is rarely about you. It is about what they want from you. The manipulator studies your insecurities, your desires, the things you long to hear, and then they give you those words, not because they believe them, but because they know you will. The danger lies in how quickly false flattery creates dependency. The brain craves affirmation. When someone feeds it, especially in ways that echo your hidden doubts, you feel a rush of connection. You begin to lean on them emotionally, seeking their words like a lifeline. And once you are hooked, they can shift the balance. The flattery becomes sporadic, conditional, withheld unless you comply. You learn to chase their praise, to work harder for their validation, to mold yourself into the image they admire. In truth, the admiration was never real. It was bait. And the more you chase it, the further you drift from your own self-worth, handing them the power to define your value. But here is the truth. Genuine flattery does not create chains. It does not demand compliance. It does not vanish the moment you resist. True praise flows naturally, without agenda. It affirms without manipulation. It celebrates without expectation. To resist false flattery is to pause when compliments feel too perfect, too exaggerated, too constant. To remind yourself, validation is not proof of love. My worth is not measured by the words someone chooses to feed me. I do not need praise to be whole, for the sweetest words are meaningless if they are not true. And real connection does not require you to be addicted to another's approval. It invites you to stand in the strength of your own. 48. Mimicry for rapport building. Familiarity builds comfort. When someone seems to move like us, speak like us, or share our rhythm, it feels natural to trust them. It is as if they belong to our world, as if we are already connected. But when that sense of connection is engineered, when imitation is used as a mask, it becomes manipulation. This is the tactic of mimicry for rapport building. It works through subtle reflection. The manipulator observes carefully your gestures, your tone, your pace of speech, and then Almost imperceptibly, they align with you. If you cross your arms, they soon cross theirs. If you lean forward with excitement, they lean forward too. If you laugh a certain way, they echo it. Even your choice of words, your slang, your rhythm of speaking, reflected back like a mirror. At first, the effect is powerful. You feel understood, comfortable, strangely close to someone you just met. Your brain interprets this harmony as a sign of safety, because we are wired to trust those who resemble us. But beneath the surface, the familiarity is an illusion. They are not revealing themselves. They are reflecting you. And the person you are bonding with may not truly exist except as a carefully constructed echo of your own presence. The danger of this tactic is that it bypasses natural trust building. Normally, rapport takes time through shared experiences, honesty, and mutual openness. But mimicry accelerates the process, tricking you into trusting too quickly, too deeply. And once trust is established, the manipulator has access, whether to your secrets, your loyalty, or your resources. Over time, cracks may appear. You may notice that their similarities never deepen into genuine individuality. They agree too easily, shift too fluidly, adapt too quickly. And when you truly need authenticity, what you find instead is hollowness. But here is the truth. Real connection does not require mimicry. It thrives on difference as well as similarity. It grows not because someone reflects us perfectly, but because they reveal themselves honestly, even when it does not match. To resist this manipulation is to notice the moments when rapport feels too instant, too smooth, too perfect. To ask, am I connecting with them, or am I connecting with a reflection of myself? Because love, trust, and friendship are not meant to be echoes. They are meant to be encounters, two distinct lives, meeting in truth, building something real together. 49. Jealousy induction. Jealousy is a sharp emotion. It cuts quickly, stirring fear of loss, fear of betrayal, fear of being replaced. Handled with care, it can reveal insecurities that need healing. But when deliberately provoked, jealousy becomes a weapon. This is the manipulation of jealousy induction. It begins with subtle provocations. They might mention someone a little too often, praising their looks, their wit, their success. They may bring up an ex-partner, weaving nostalgia into their words. Or they might flirt openly with strangers, laughing, complimenting, touching, while making sure that you are watching. Each act is intentional. Each act plants the seed. You are not enough. You can be replaced. I hold the power to choose someone else. The effect is immediate. Your mind begins to race. Do they still want me? Am I losing them? What do I have to do to keep their attention? Your heart fills with anxiety, and instead of questioning their behavior, you start questioning your own worth. This is the brilliance and cruelty of jealousy induction. It shifts the balance of power. Suddenly, they're no longer the one seeking your love. You are the one fighting for theirs. And in that struggle, they gain control. Because when jealousy is stirred, logic fades. You may forgive what you would never forgive. Compromise where you should stand firm just to secure their affection again. You may even compete against imagined rivals, pouring energy into proving yourself to someone who deliberately destabilized you. Over time, this tactic conditions you to equate love with insecurity, passion with unease, attachment with fear, you begin to crave reassurance from the very person who caused your distress, binding you closer even as they hurt you. But here is the truth. Love does not thrive on fear. Connection does not need rivalry to survive. And true intimacy does not grow in the shadow of constant doubt. To resist this manipulation is to pause when jealousy arises and ask, did this feeling come from reality or was it planted? Because when jealousy is deliberately induced, the problem is not your insecurity, it is their control. Real love does not provoke fear to prove loyalty. It does not keep you guessing to keep you close. It does not need to shake your confidence in order to deepen its hold. Love, when it is true, steadies. It reassures. It makes you feel chosen, not threatened, not replaced. 50. Weaponized incompetence relationships are built on cooperation, on sharing responsibilities, supporting each other, and carrying life's burdens together. But when one person deliberately pretends to be incapable, the balance shifts. Tasks pile on to one side, while the other avoids responsibility through feigned helplessness. This is the manipulation of weaponized incompetence. It often begins with small acts of mistake. They load the dishwasher the wrong way. They forget how to pay bills online. They fold clothes poorly, leave chores half done, or claim confusion over tasks most adults can manage. At first, it looks like simple clumsiness or lack of skill. So you step in, redoing, correcting, taking over, and soon the pattern repeats. Again and again, they prove themselves incapable until eventually you stop asking. You carry the burden yourself because it feels easier than teaching, correcting, or facing disappointment. But this incompetence is not genuine. It is strategic. By pretending to be less capable, they ensure that you shoulder the responsibility. And once you are trained to expect nothing from them, their freedom is secured at your expense. The impact is subtle but corrosive. You begin to feel more like a caretaker than a partner, more like a manager than an equal. Instead of shared effort, the relationship becomes lopsided, you doing the heavy lifting while they reap the comfort of lowered expectations. The cruelty lies in the pretense, because the helplessness is not born of inability, but of convenience. They are not incapable, they are unwilling. And the act of incompetence becomes their shield against accountability. Over time, this tactic drains more than energy. It erodes respect. You may start to feel resentful, exhausted, even trapped in the role of the responsible one. And yet, when you raise the issue, they may shrug, laugh, or feign innocence. But you know I'm not good at that. But here is the truth. Partnership requires effort, not excuses. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, but genuine weakness is met with willingness to learn, not refusal to try. Real love does not hand you the weight of two lives while pretending to stumble under none. To resist weaponized incompetence is to stop mistaking unwillingness for incapacity. To say, I will not do everything for you. If you can learn, then you must learn. Responsibility is not mine alone to carry, because true partnership is not built on helplessness. It is built on shared responsibility. And when that balance is restored, love can thrive not as burden, but as bond. 51. Future-faking hope is one of the most powerful forces in human life. It pulls us forward, gives us strength, and helps us endure the struggles of the present. And in relationships, The promise of a shared future can feel like the ultimate expression of love and commitment. But what happens when that future is nothing more than smoke and mirrors? When the promises are never meant to be fulfilled, but only spoken to bind you in the present? This is the tactic of future faking. It often begins with grand visions painted in vivid color. One day, we'll travel the world together. Next year, I'll finally marry you. I just need to get a few things sorted out. We'll build a life so beautiful, people will envy us. The details are rich, seductive, intoxicating. They describe houses, adventures, children, careers, a perfect tomorrow that feels almost tangible. And as you listen, your heart begins to invest. You start making sacrifices in the present because you believe in the brilliance of what's ahead. But the manipulator never intends to deliver. The promises are not commitments, they are tools. Their purpose is not to build a future, but to secure your loyalty now. And the longer you wait, the deeper your attachment grows. The cruelty of future faking lies in its timing. Whenever doubt arises, whenever you question the cracks in the present, they point to the promise of tomorrow. Things may be hard now, but just wait. You'll see how amazing it will be. And so, you silence your concerns. You forgive the neglect, the distance, the broken agreements, because you believe they are only temporary obstacles on the way to something greater. But days turn to months, months to years, and the promised future never comes. And each time you confront the absence, another story is spun, another dream dangled just beyond reach. Over time, this manipulation drains your energy, your trust, your very sense of reality. You become so tied to the imagined tomorrow that you forget to question the truth of today. But here is the truth. Real love is not built on illusions of tomorrow. It shows itself in actions today. Promises mean little without follow-through. And no vision of the future, no matter how radiant, should cost you the truth of the present. To resist future faking is to anchor yourself in now, to ask, what are they doing today to make that future real? Are their actions aligning with their words? Because hope is sacred. But when it is manipulated, it becomes a cage. And freedom begins with recognizing that the future should not be faked. It should be built, step by step, promise by promise, in the light of the present moment. 52. Silent treatment. Silence can be peaceful, healing, even sacred. But silence can also be sharp, a blade wielded in the shadows. When words are withdrawn, not for calm, but for punishment, silence becomes cruelty. This is the tactic of silent treatment. It does not arrive with raised voices or visible conflict. It arrives with absence. One day, the warmth of communication is gone. The smile, the acknowledgement, the simple recognition of your presence vanished. You speak, but there is no reply. You explain, but your words dissolve into air. You reach out for reassurance, only to meet a cold wall of indifference. The manipulator does not need to say anything, because the silence says it all. You don't matter. You are invisible. You are being punished. This withdrawal of recognition destabilizes the deepest human need, the need to be seen. When stripped of acknowledgement, you begin to feel not just unheard, but unreal. And in that void, doubt and guilt creep in. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? Maybe if I just try harder, they'll see me again. This is the trap. The silence forces you into pursuit. You scramble for their attention, apologize for things you may not have done, and surrender your boundaries just to break the unbearable quiet. The cruelty lies in how silence feels louder than any argument. Words of anger can be confronted. Even shouting can be answered. But silence leaves you defenseless, locked in uncertainty, crushed by an invisible weight. And over time, it conditions you to fear disconnection. You learn to avoid conflict, not because you agree, but because you dread the punishment of being erased. But here is the truth. Real love does not erase you. True care does not withhold presence as a weapon. And silence, when healthy, is chosen together for rest, reflection, or peace, not imposed to control. To resist a silent treatment is to refuse to chase acknowledgement that is deliberately withheld. To remind yourself, their silence is not proof of my worth. I do not need to beg to exist in someone else's eyes. A genuine connection may struggle, may falter, but it does not vanish into calculated absence. And the loudest truth of all is this: you are not invisible. You were never meant to be treated as if you were. 53. Preemptive invalidation. Every human being longs to be heard, to voice thoughts, to share feelings, to have our inner world acknowledged. This is the foundation of connection. But when our voice is cut off before it can even emerge, the wound is sharp. This is the manipulation of preemptive invalidation. It works by striking first. Before you have a chance to speak your truth, they dismiss it. I already know what you're going to say. Don't even start. It's ridiculous. Here comes your drama again. In that instant, your voice is silenced, not because you chose quiet, but because your truth was denied before it was born. The cruelty lies in its efficiency. You are disarmed before the conversation begins. Your perspective, your feelings, your boundaries are all erased with a single wave of the hand. And because you never get to speak, you are left questioning yourself. Maybe they're right. Maybe my thoughts are nonsense. Maybe I really am overreacting. Over time, this tactic suffocates. The more often your words are invalidated before they leave your lips, the less you try to express them at all. You learn to swallow your concerns, to silence your emotions, to doubt the legitimacy of your own inner voice. And slowly, you become a shadow of yourself, present but muted. The danger of preemptive invalidation is that it attacks not just your arguments, but your right to have them. It doesn't challenge your feelings. It denies your permission to feel. It does not debate your thoughts. It erases your capacity to think. But here is the truth. No one has the authority to declare your feelings invalid before they are spoken. Your voice matters, not because it is perfect, but because it is yours. Your emotions deserve acknowledgement, not dismissal. To resist this manipulation is to reclaim the right to speak, even when they try to silence you in advance. To remind yourself, my truth is worth voicing, even if it is denied. My thoughts have value, even if they are dismissed. My emotions are real, even if they are inconvenient. But true respect listens before it responds. True love does not preemptively strike down your words. It holds space for them even when they are hard to hear. 54. Framing with false urgency. Urgency has power. When danger strikes, when an opportunity appears, when time runs short, our minds are wired to act quickly. This instinct once kept our ancestors alive. React now, think later. But when urgency is manufactured, when pressure is staged to cloud judgment, it becomes manipulation. This is the tactic of framing with false urgency. It often arrives wrapped in opportunity. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. If you don't act now, it's gone forever. Decide immediately. Tomorrow will be too late. The words push you into a corner, shrinking your options. Your brain, sensing time slipping away, shifts into survival mode. Instead of careful reasoning, adrenaline takes over. You no longer weigh possibilities. You grasp for escape, for relief, for the quickest solution. And in that heightened state, the manipulator's preferred choice is already waiting. The contract signed, the money handed over, the agreement made, not because it was best for you, but because it was fastest for them. The cruelty of false urgency lies in how convincingly it mimics real urgency. The heart pounds, the nerves fire, the body reacts as though the threat were real. And yet, there is no true emergency, only a story carefully crafted to strip away your pause. Over time, repeated exposure to this tactic can erode your confidence. You may begin to feel that you cannot trust yourself to make good decisions under pressure. You may rush choices in fear of missing out, only to regret them once the fog clears. And slowly, you start living reactively, always caught in the rhythm of someone else's false alarms. But here is the truth. Very few choices in life truly demand an instant answer. Real opportunities withstand patience. Real love does not expire on a timer. Real respect allows you the space to think. To resist false urgency is to breathe when pressured. To remind yourself, if this is truly right for me, it will still be right when I've had time to reflect. But wisdom rarely comes from rushing. It comes from the stillness that urgency tries so hard to steal. 55. Deceptive framing words are not only tools of expression, they are tools of perception. The way something is framed shapes how we see it, how we judge it, and even how we remember it. And when framing is twisted, truth can be buried under carefully chosen language. This is the manipulation of deceptive framing. It does not rely on lies in a traditional sense. Instead, it reshapes reality through presentation. The same act, dressed in different words, carries a completely different weight. They do not say, "I ignored you." They say, "I gave you space because I didn't want to overwhelm you." They do not say, "I broke a promise." They say, "Plans changed, and I thought flexibility was better for both of us." They do not say, "I disrespected your boundary." They say, "I was just trying to show love in my own way." The action remains the same, but the frame shifts. And in that shift, your anger begins to feel unreasonable. Your disappointment feels selfish. Your truth begins to feel like overreaction. This is the cruelty of deceptive framing. It doesn't erase the harm. It erases your right to name it. You find yourself second-guessing, maybe I am being unfair. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe they're right over time. This tactic erodes confidence in your own perception. If every violation can be rephrased as a kindness, every neglect reframed as care, every betrayal painted as misunderstanding, then what is left of your reality? You stop trusting your eyes, your feelings, your memory. And in that fog, their version of the story becomes the only one that matters. But here is the truth. Framing does not change facts. Disrespect is still disrespect, even when wrapped in softer words. Neglect is still neglect, even when dressed as freedom. And betrayal is still betrayal, no matter how gently it is described. To resist deceptive framing is to look past the packaging and return to the substance. To ask, what actually happened. What was the impact on me, regardless of how it's described? Because truth does not need clever framing to stand, and love, when it is real, does not twist words to make you doubt yourself. It speaks plainly, honestly, without disguise. Dark psychology moves quietly, almost invisibly. It does not always announce itself with loud threats or open hostility. Instead, it weaves into the spaces of everyday life, through words, gestures, silences, and promises. It seeps into relationships, workplaces, families, and even the ways we speak to ourselves. That is what makes it so powerful and so dangerous. Because the less we notice it, the more it shapes us. The more we overlook it, the deeper its roots grow. But knowledge brings light. And understanding these tactics is not about learning how to manipulate others. It is about recognizing when manipulation is aimed at us. It is about protecting our boundaries, reclaiming our voice, and holding firm to our dignity. It is about remembering that freedom begins in the mind, and no one has the right to take that from us. So as we close this exploration, let us carry forward not suspicion, but awareness. Let us not harden our hearts, but sharpen our perception. For when we learn to see clearly, manipulation loses its power. In every interaction, in every exchange, we have the chance to practice presence, to pause, to reflect, to ask ourselves, am I acting from truth or am I reacting to pressure? This simple habit of reflection becomes a shield, a quiet strength that no tactic can easily break. And so, the invitation is this: observe carefully, reflect deeply, nurture awareness in the smallest conversations of daily life. Because with awareness, we are no longer helpless targets of dark psychology. With awareness, we stand rooted in freedom, guided not by manipulation, but by clarity. And clarity is where true strength begins.